YouTube link will become available 24 to 48 hours after the meeting has taken place. Also, the meeting will be available as a broadcast with closed captioning on Comcast Xfinity channels 25 and 1085, Verizon Fios channels 39 and 40, 24 hours or 48 hours after the meeting as well. Check the Planning Commission website for further information. Audio of tonight's meeting is also available via phone. If commissioners, presenters, or speakers lose internet connectivity during tonight's meeting, please reconnect with us by phone. For other presenters and speakers joining us through Microsoft Teams, please keep your phones and devices muted until you're called upon. Please turn off sound to any other device around you to minimize interference, and please keep your cameras off until the clerk calls on you to speak. So right now we have some members of the public who have their cameras on. Would you mind turning them off, please? Thank you. When called upon to speak, you must unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon that's located on your meeting command bar. The moderator does not have the ability to unmute you. Once you've spoken, please turn your cameras off. If you are dialing in by phone, press *6 to unmute. Public speakers, you will be called upon by the clerk at an assigned time. Pre-registration to speak at tonight's hearing was required. We are not able to accommodate any additional speakers. Speakers will have 2 minutes to comment as an individual and 3 minutes to comment as a representative of an organization or county board appointed advisory group. A timer will be displayed on the screen when speaking virtually. Speakers in person will follow the timer at the podium. If you are dialing in by phone and unable to see the screen, we will provide an audible 30-second warning. You will be muted when your time has concluded. The meeting chat is active for presenters or commissioners who need technical assistance only. Please do not use the meeting chat for discussion, public comment, questions about agenda items, or requests for more information. All public comment must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public testimony period. Lastly, this is a public forum. Tonight's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website via a link to YouTube as stated. All information associated with tonight's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to the Virginia Freedom of Information Act requirements. One last thing, and I don't think it'll be necessary to say, but when you are speaking, please remember that the space around the speaker is preserved and reserved for them and any person that they intend to have come up and speak with them. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, can we please call the first item?
Our item for the evening is Planned Langston Boulevard Plan. Request to advertise for the adoption of the Langston Boulevard Area Plan and associated amendments to the General Land Use Plan, the GLUP map, and booklet, Master Transportation Plan, the MTP, and Zoning Ordinance, ZO, related to the Langston Boulevard Planning Study. We have our planning staff and project manager for this item, Natasha Alfonso, to present.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Good evening. My name again is Natasha Alfonso Ahmed with the Planning Division. I'm joined tonight in person and virtually by other team members in other divisions, including DES, DPR, and AED. As was previously stated, this is a request for the PC to recommend adoption of the resolution authorizing advertisement of public hearings in November by the Planning Commission and County Board to consider the adoption of the Langston Boulevard Area Plan and associated amendments. The General Land Use Plan amendments include establishing the Langston Boulevard Planning District to realize the plan's goals through new GLUB policy and zoning tools, adding open space triangles on the GLUB to indicate generally where public spaces are desired, removing parcels within the Cherrydale Revitalization District adjacent to areas where redevelopment has already occurred per Cherrydale Plan goals to allow for expanded housing options, and removing the HDD designations for parcels in the core area given the establishment of the planning district and new guidance for multifamily residential properties. The Master Transportation Plan amendments include adding the Langston Boulevard Planning District boundary as a new area planned for new streets on the MTP map, and amending the second page of the map to note that this is an area with new planned on-street bike lanes. The zoning ordinance amendments include clarifying that townhouses will only be allowed by site plan within the Langston Boulevard Planning District, and amending the CO 2.5 zoning district preamble to clarify it can apply to areas outside of metro transit corridors so that the zoning tool can be used on Langston Boulevard. Next slide. The planning process has provided multiple engagement opportunities since the beginning of the study. This is just a list of the recent engagements since the release of the June draft in preparation for the RTA draft. There are several issues to address, balancing many community perspectives. The main ones are related to building height, affordable housing forecasts, and tools to achieve CAFs, impact of redevelopment on businesses and parking, and county participation in major infrastructure projects, including transit and stormwater. The draft plan is a comprehensive, high-level vision for the corridor that will guide both public and private investment long-term. We are currently completing the last phase of a multi-phase planning study, which began in 2019. The RTA draft addresses community and county board feedback received on the first draft of the plan, which was released in June. It includes policies and recommendations and design guidelines to support the goals and vision of a green Main Street, as well as implementation strategies. The plan's vision and recommendations for corridor-wide elements, which include transportation and open space, apply to the complete planning area. The plan's recommendations focus primarily on the core area, which is outlined in pink on this map, and includes areas that are located on or near Langston Boulevard, in areas designated for commercial or multifamily uses on the county's general land use plan, and in limited locations in areas that include single detached homes. Recommendations for all elements will apply to the core study area for neighborhoods 2, 3, and 5, which includes 5 West and 5 East. Areas 1 and 4, which are East Falls Church and Cherrydale respectively, have adopted plans and policies that will continue to apply there. The plan's policies and recommendations are centered around sustainability, environmental resilience, and equity by applying a sustainable and equitable approach to land uses, by supporting and strengthening the diverse commercial base, by leveraging proximity to transit and existing activity centers to reduce travel times and carbon emissions, and by increasing housing supply and meeting the needs of diverse residents and household types. The plan proposes goals and policies for each of the key planning elements supported by design principles and guidelines related to the built environment and public realm. The plan's goal is to incentivize positive change in the core areas by providing other choices besides by right development, which will only exacerbate the problems that we have today. This could require greater reliance on public funds and fewer strategic public-private projects to achieve the desired improvements, thus lengthening the time to meet many of the countywide priorities. On the other hand, if we proactively plan for change in coordination with other countywide plans, policies, and regulations, we have a better chance of controlling the outcome and meeting the county's goals and the community's aspirations. With the draft plan that was released in June, we provided numerous opportunities for community discussions, including in-person open houses at the design studio, focus group meetings with various representatives of the community forum and civic associations, and an online engagement forum. We also conducted briefings with commissions and advisory boards and held a county board work session to seek feedback on the plan's recommendations and staff's position related to community concerns. The comments and staff responses are documented in the staff report and comment matrix, which we plan to share later this week with the county board report distribution. So I will now provide a very brief overview of the framework for each of the planning elements, along with the key concerns that we have heard from the community and information on what has changed from the June draft to the RTA draft to address the concerns that we heard. The core study area, as most of you know, is primarily characterized by low-rise commercial land uses, surface parking, and pockets of multifamily residential properties with extensive impervious surfaces and aging buildings that are not energy efficient. The corridor also lacks mixed-use development that supports a walkable Main Street environment. The current housing in the planning area provides limited opportunities for lower middle-income households. While the corridor overall has lower percentages of residents of color and is more affluent, there are specific areas within 3 census tracts that have a higher percentage of residents of color in households earning less than $99,000 per year than the county as a whole. So to achieve the vision for a green Main Street that links neighborhoods to businesses, mixed-use activity nodes, housing, and public spaces, a new land use framework is needed. The map here illustrates how development should be concentrated in the mixed-use activity hubs connected by areas that are predominantly multifamily to expand opportunities for increasing the housing supply along the corridor. And the plan proposes 4 new activity hubs in addition to East Falls Church and Cherrydale. The land use framework supports the policies on economic vitality and housing by concentrating development in the core areas that support commercial activity and jobs and expand the residential uses and densities that are allowed in those areas to increase the housing supply and levels of affordability. To support the land use framework, the use maps indicate where mixed-use development and other uses are recommended and identify ground floor priority areas, which are areas where the ground floor should remain non-residential and where spaces should be built as commercial ready and able to support retail or retail equivalent uses when the market can deliver. Two overall concerns were heard regarding the proposed framework. The first is related to the proposed scale and extent of change in the core area, and the second is related to the potential impact on existing businesses with redevelopment. To address the concerns heard, the plan provides new policies and strategies that support existing business owners while also attracting new businesses. They also support renovation and redevelopment of constrained and small sites in line with the plan's goals, and new policies that promote publicly accessible parking nodes and activity hubs to support customers, businesses, and public spaces. These policies recognize the importance of minimizing surface parking to support an attractive Main Street environment, while also ensuring that available parking for new and existing businesses, that parking is available for new and existing businesses. They also recognize that new connections can facilitate consolidated access to parking, which is needed to reduce conflicts between pedestrians, bikes, and vehicles along Langston Boulevard. The concerns around housing were mostly about how many affordable housing units are attainable under the plan, the potential concentration of affordable units in some areas with existing affordable housing, the prioritization of renovated marks, the need to provide CAFs at deeper subsidies, and opportunities for revisiting the East Falls Church and Cherry plans to optimize the affordable housing supply along the corridor. The 2015 Affordable Housing Master Plan indicated a need for 2,500 affordable units by 2040 through a combination of committed and market rate affordable units. Multiple stakeholder groups are focused on how many affordable housing units are attainable under this plan and how that number compares to the plan's identified future CAF allotment for the corridor. So during the development of the PCP in 2022, staff analyzed the potential housing supply and affordable units along the corridor. The goal of that analysis was to determine what it would take to meet the 2015 CAF allotment for 2,500 units in the area within the proposed building height envelopes, which were lowered based on community feedback. The analysis indicated that we needed to achieve a minimum of 10% of the total units in new development to reach that target. At that time, staff was not factoring in how potential incentive-based tools would be used and assumed that sites with lower development potential, meaning sites that are up to 6 stories in height, would need to contribute the same percentage. The analysis also assumed above ground parking, which is much more cost effective. Next slide. The draft that was released in June provided updated figures, which accounted for height increases in a few select areas. The building height maps in the June draft were responsive to mixed feedback, which we heard during the development of the PCP when we studied the trade-offs for different densities and building heights. The community feedback on the PCP raised concerns on heights in certain geographies, but also suggested that Langston Boulevard is critical to meeting many county policies and goals, and the PCP was simply not bold enough to help meet those goals. So based on conversations with the Langston Boulevard Alliance and the community forum leaders to consider additional height, we increased the building heights in select areas to provide additional opportunities for implementing the vision through private redevelopment. Since the release of the June draft, staff has taken a closer look at the potential housing supply and affordable units along the corridor, but this time factored in how the proposed incentive-based tools would be used. In the recent analysis, staff did not assume any CAF contributions in areas 1 and 4, since those areas needed to be looked at more comprehensively, and on sites with lower development potential against sites that are lower or up to 6 stories in height, since we are recommending to study the potential for a new or adapted special exception approval process to facilitate improvements on those sites that are mostly constrained. This analysis focused instead on properties with the most opportunity for change, height, and density, which included over 30 parcels at key intersections and activity hubs in neighborhood areas 2, 3, and 5. For these sites, the analysis assumed below ground parking, which gave us the opportunity to evaluate the housing supply and affordable units based on the maximum buildable area that could be achieved within the building height limits. And as you can see, 2 scenarios were analyzed utilizing different average unit sizes. So based on all of these analyses, we've concluded that there's a wide range for what we can achieve in terms of the overall housing supply and affordability. The potential units in the planning area by 2027 by 2075 could range between 19,000 to 26,000 units overall, which is approximately up between 9,400 to 16,000 net new units. The total potential affordable units by 2075 can also range between 3,175 to 3,807 units. The table on this slide compares the current distribution of affordable units to the potential distribution by neighborhood area and is based on the proposed incentive-based tools that you see in the plan. The projected affordability is again expected to remain distributed across the corridor with the greatest share in areas 3 and 5 west. The supply of affordable units may be increased in the future if additional incentives or strategies become available with further review and consideration of the Cherrydale and East Falls Church adopted plans. The timing for that, as we said before, will be considered as part of the annual plan work discussions. And for East Falls Church, this will also be based on clear interest by VDOT and WMATA in joint development or in air rights at the metro site. So to address the concerns regarding housing, the plan provides new policies and strategies that indicate the county should target the use of AHIF funds for projects that propose significant quantities of on-site affordable housing, particularly caps at deeper subsidies, and for land acquisition by affordable housing providers to increase geographic distribution of caps on Langston with the goal of providing equitable opportunities in all neighborhoods. The plan also indicates the county will monitor the housing supply and need at all income levels and will use the funds to provide caps specifically for households earning below 30% AMI and households earning between 60 to 80% AMI. The policies encourage an increase in affordable units through new on-site units and the conversion of existing marks to CAFs, achieved through new land use and zoning incentives to mitigate the loss of marks through redevelopment and rent increases, which we know is a continuous threat. So as we know, the renovation of buildings alone does not ensure the preservation of marks. While redevelopment poses threats, it can provide more opportunities for maintaining existing affordability levels. It is anticipated that most development applications along the corridor would be reviewed through the site plan review process, in which case the affordable housing ordinance would apply. So in addition to the minimum cash contributions that they would be expected to provide, property owners may request additional density above. Okay, I think I lost there. So again, property owners may request additional density above the GLUP within the building heights allowed in exchange for on-site affordable housing. This will lead to an outcome that is preferable to by right redevelopment, where there would be no committed affordable contributions, meaning cash or units, and no site improvements that will help us meet the plan's goals. So the plan ultimately was updated to clarify that a range of options, including renovation, infill, and redevelopment, are possible and supported. However, renovation over redevelopment is not necessarily prioritized. Next. The policies on building form are aimed at achieving sensitive building design by focusing the tallest building heights at activity hubs, key intersections, and within walking distance of metro and bus stops, and by establishing minimum setbacks, upper story stepbacks, and desired height transitions. The policies also focus on achieving development that fosters a healthy urban environment, enhancing connections to nature, and retrofitting surface parking with landscaping to reduce impervious surfaces. As I said before, staff increased the building heights in areas outlined in red in response to community feedback, urging to provide additional opportunities for implementing the vision and countywide goals through private redevelopment. However, concerns related to the building heights, setbacks, upper story stepbacks, and impacts to traffic and school capacity still remain. To address the concerns heard, the plan provides new language in the design guidelines to clarify minimum building setbacks and stepbacks in very specific locations. It also clarifies that maps are not to scale and intended to show general height zones only. And it clarifies how height is measured for sites in floodplain areas and sites abutting or across the street from low density residential. The plan's policies for historic preservation focus on honoring the significant resources along the corridor by recommending partial or full preservation and interpretation. There are several property owners who are requesting to remove the preservation recommendations. Additional language has been provided in the RTA draft to clarify that redevelopment is allowed and that preservation and interpretation decisions should be balanced with the other countywide and plan goals. The policies on transportation focus on creating complete streets that accommodate all modes of travel adequately and safely, reducing driveways to minimize conflict points, expanding the street, pedestrian and bicycle networks, enhancing transit service, and promoting different parking strategies. There are two main concerns around transportation. The first relates to the elements needed to transform the corridor into a main street, which include the expansion of the street grid and reduction of travel lanes east of Spout Run, and the potential impacts on existing neighborhoods and surrounding streets as a result of that. The second relates to the desire for greater county participation in achieving the ultimate cross-section from Lexington Boulevard, including enhanced transit services like BRT or premium service and advanced implementation of transit services to increase ridership. To address the concerns heard, the plan provides new language to articulate vehicles will continue to be the predominant mode of travel, and to clarify where and how improvements will be made and that they will be incremental. The plan modifies the proposed transit actions. It adds an implementation strategy for preparing a detailed transportation analysis of the Area 5 cross-section in coordination with VDOT. It also adds new language and guidance about parking and identifies two new intersections in Area 5 East to be locations for future study. There are 24 existing public spaces in the planning area with varying types of amenities. However, they are not always well connected and some neighborhoods lack spaces. With increased growth, there will be a need for additional public spaces in the core area. The policies for public spaces, which are in alignment with the PSMP, focus on expanding the network by achieving new privately owned public spaces with redevelopment, providing a variety of space types, and expanding connections to these spaces. Through this plan, there is a potential to achieve an additional 28 spaces in the core area over time in the form of plazas and parks, adding an additional 6.31 acres of potential land area, and an additional 17,200 linear feet in the form of greenways, which are pedestrian and bicycle connections. The main concerns related to public spaces are centered around the desire for additional county-owned spaces that can accommodate activities and programs organized by the LBA. To address the concerns heard, the plan adds new language to clarify that as part of future public space planning processes, the county will evaluate public space needs periodically to address the changing context and the needs of the community. It adds language to acknowledge the need for accommodating spaces for children and designing spaces that provide accessibility regardless of age or ability. It includes a policy to support special event programming hosted by private organizations. It clarifies that when future studies of the Lee and Langston Brown Community Center sites occur, the county will undergo a public process to seek community input on the future use and design of those sites, and will evaluate opportunities for balancing community needs and aspirations, including the desire to retain park space at both sites. The plan also clarifies that depending on site-specific conditions, timing, and funding, the county may design and construct public spaces on private right-of-way and property when it would not otherwise be implemented through private redevelopment. It also clarifies that the county may assist with higher cost public space improvements when adjacent redevelopment occurs. Only 21% of the core area has tree canopy coverage compared to the county average of 40%. Approximately 70% of the core area is impervious, which is also located along the top of 13 watersheds, causing increased flooding in downstream neighborhoods. The plan recommends detention and overland relief in specific locations where new parks, plazas, or greenways are recommended as part of redevelopment to detain water or provide a safe path for it to flow. There are two main concerns related to sustainability and resilience, which are centered around the desire for greater county participation in stormwater improvements and providing specific tree canopy targets for private development. Again, to address those concerns, the plan clarifies that the Risk Assessment Management Plan, or RAMP, will identify additional long-term strategies for stormwater countywide and in the planning area that will inform and prioritize strategic capital investments. It adds specific tree canopy targets for private development. The targets strive for at least 35% tree canopy coverage across the entire core area, attained through a combination of 40% coverage in public parks, 20% coverage at APS sites, and 20 to 35% coverage on private property through new trees along improved streetscapes and on site, and an additional 5% coverage of non-tree vegetation, which may include green roofs, walls, and terraces. Therefore, with this presentation, staff recommends the Planning Commission move to recommend adoption of the resolution authorizing advertisement of public hearings in November by the Planning Commission and County Board to consider the adoption of the Langston Boulevard Area Plan and the associated amendments mentioned before. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers?
Any speakers, you say? In-person speakers, we have 13 speakers for in-person. So when I call your name, I will display the list, but when I call your name, I'll call 2 by 2. If you all could just please begin to move up to the podium, that would be greatly appreciated. The first 4 speakers will be 3-minute speakers only. The first speaker is Joan McIntyre, followed by Wilma Jones.
Good evening. I'm Joan McIntyre, speaking for the Climate Change, Energy, and Environment Commission. C2E2 endorses the overall vision of the Langston Boulevard to transform current auto-centric, low-density commercial buildings into vibrant, transit-oriented green Main Street centered around several activity hubs. We commend the staff for presenting a comprehensive plan. That said, C2E2 has concerns about the plan and recommends some modifications to more fully capture a truly green Main Street. The plan should prioritize preservation of existing multi-story buildings through adaptive reuse. Demolition and construction have a high carbon footprint that should be avoided when possible. The table on page 78 identifies numerous buildings, many of which are market rate affordable housing for redevelopment, but could be good candidates for renovation. The county might facilitate such renovations with assistance to finding financing and tapping into government rebates and other funding sources. Renovation would also preserve existing open spaces and mature tree canopy coverage. The recent addition of targets for a 35% tree canopy coverage in the core area is positive, but it's important that the plan actually clearly identify the setbacks, lot coverages, and other zoning requirements necessary to achieve this goal. More discussion is warranted for reducing urban heat island impact of future development, explicitly including best practices under design principles as a companion to biophilic principles, as there is considerable overlap between the two important climate mitigation strategies. C2E2 recommends that the plan should set zero carbon and zero energy buildings as the norm for the corridor and to more clearly describe what is required to achieve this. A section in the design principle chapter could be added to identify current best practices for maximizing energy efficiency, eliminating on-site combustion of fossil fuels through electrification, installing rooftop solar, and selecting low and even negative carbon materials. C2E2 recommends that the plan identify a pathway to reduce traffic and make Langston Boulevard people and not car-centric through improved alternatives, including more frequent buses and microtransit and micromobility options. C2E2 would also like to see inclusion of potential county programs, policies, and incentives that could help ensure that the county goals are achieved and to avoid piecemeal implementation of key aspects of this plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Wilma Jones, followed by Jason Schwartz. Excuse me, Ms. Wilma.
Good evening, Commission. I am the president of the John M. Langston Citizens Association. We advocate for the welfare of the Halls Hill Highview Park community, which is in Area 3. We have worked with the Langston Boulevard Alliance and the Plan Langston Boulevard Arlington County staff over this entire process, and we've been very consistent about what we've asked for. And we were really very much more supportive before the June revision came out, because we are one of those communities that asked for, especially the 5,000 block of Lee Highway, to be 4 stories, not 5, except for the building that's at one of those major intersections, the Capital One building at at Langston Boulevard and George Mason. But we feel that, and actually in one of the Langston Boulevard Alliance meetings, the Citizens Association that's behind the children's school told us about the impact to those homes that are right behind there. And that's the same kind of thing that's trying to happen down on our end of Langston Boulevard. We really would like for you to consider to make that change for that one block to go back to 4 stories. All of those buildings now are very, very small. That's right in the same block where Callaway is, our historic church. In addition, we just got a $25,000 historic preservation grant. So we are actively working to, work on the neighborhood and to, keep the historic and the important parts of it. And we feel that 5 stories would impact that. In addition, the affordable housing, and we know the higher stories were done for affordable housing, but our neighborhood is one of those neighborhoods that is much more diverse and is not as wealthy as many areas in Langston Boulevard. And our neighborhood has 585 residences. That's apartments and homes. We have well over 10% that are affordable housing units already. We feel like the rest of the Langston Boulevard neighborhood should catch up to us before we are given even more to get on, because we're concerned about the character of our community. And we know that the Planning Commission and the County Board want to make decisions that are best for the residents and the overall Arlington community. And I understand the people who might not live close to there feeling that we should have a higher density, but there are other areas of Langston Boulevard that already have high buildings and that don't have homes that live quite as, where people live quite as close. So we would ask you to please try to do a little bit better job balancing the community needs and aspirations, because there are a lot of initiatives going on, Missing Middle, Affordable Housing Master Plan, like Plan Langston Boulevard. We'd like for there to look like a little more coordination and a little more concern for some of the people who live close by. Thank you.
Next speaker is Jason Schwartz, followed by Ann Bodine.
Good evening. My name is Jason Schwartz, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Yimbys of Nova. We support more homes for more people in order to increase affordability and prevent displacement, especially low-income and marginalized people. Yimbys of Nova is excited about the prospect of a more walkable, bikeable Langston Boulevard with more housing options for people of all incomes. We'd first like to thank staff for their hard work on the plan and their community outreach. While there have been some changes made to the plan to increase housing supply along the corridor, the plan falls way short of the already established affordable housing master plan goals. This is the #1 issue that must be addressed in Plan Langston Boulevard. The draft plan calls for less than 1,200 net new committed affordable units by 2040, which is less than half of the 2,500 unit goal. The AHMP was passed by the County Board in September 2015 after 3 years of detailed analysis and community engagement. At the 2015 September County Board meeting, there were over 2.5 hours of public testimony, with most people supporting more affordable housing. As noted in the RTA plan in section 1.7, we need to, quote, achieve more additional housing at activity hubs and major intersections that connect directly to the Roslyn-Ballston Metro Corridor. Area 5 should be added to this statement. Langston Boulevard is only a 10-minute walk from the Roslyn Courthouse and Clarendon Metro stations. Area 5 should be treated as an extension to the RB corridor because it simply is. Our letter to the County Board and Planning Commission submitted last month includes other asks to staff, such as 1, ensuring the heights are sufficient along the entire planning area to make the desired infrastructure and other public benefits not just feasible, but likely to be achieved. 2, stipulating that public land on the site will be used for multiple purposes whenever possible, including affordable housing to maximize land resources. 3, to the maximum extent possible, redesign the streetscape to prioritize people walking, biking, micromobility, and using public transit. And 4, to add infrastructure and amenities to make the Langston Boulevard an area for all ages and abilities, including children. In the September 12th County Board Plan Langston Boulevard group session, it was noted that there was not a, quote, huge upset when the plan came out. It's easy to see why, given the very low housing ambition. We pride ourselves on creating a welcoming and inclusive community. We need to plan based on our housing goals and meet the needs of all Arlingtonians, of which 62% are renters. Let's advertise a plan that actually supports these ideals and not just empty rhetoric. Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Ann Bodine.
Good evening. I'm Ann Bodine from Arlingtonians for Our Sustainable Future, and thank you for letting me speak. Plan Langston Boulevard is transit-oriented development without the transit. It coasts on high rhetoric with little data. It leaves out schools, rec centers, and major stormwater projects because the county says there's no land, while giving private owners 3 to 4 times the current allowed density. We will see 7, 10, and 15 stories at the nodes, even before site planning, and much higher infill with no parking along the rest of the corridor. How does this translate into a green Main Street? It does not. Langston will remain Highway 29, a full-on commuter and truck route that is also an evacuation and national defense roadway. It is owned by the state, and the state has not yet conceded to this plan. Staff's appealing slideshow gives us designs that are lovely, but survive only through the final board vote when they are replaced by the architectural shop of horrors we see in the new building across from Bosman Center, or the brown hulks along Columbia Pike with no transition to neighbors and little greenscape. We need design requirements, not slick packaging that shows more trees than concrete, as we see here in the top page of PLB. PLB does not deliver the planned number of affordable units and is likely to displace hundreds from market rate affordables. Redlining kept people out. This will push people out who are already here. Their homes will go to landfills. They will go to Prince William. It's a double tragedy. And the new CAFs will not make up for the loss of units under 60% of AMI. The claim of 35% tree canopy at ground level is not credible. 10 stories on narrow strips means covering lot line to lot line or cheating on step backs. We suggest instead adding trees with existing TCF funds and letting owners develop by right up to 4 to 5 stories, and avoiding these plus-ups that don't deliver the required benefits. PLB must teach us that the private sector is not the proper steward of the public realm. The county government is remiss in claiming it cannot pay for infrastructure except through upzoning and higher land use. ASF shares your vision for green, diverse, financial responsible planning, but also wants balance with public spaces and infrastructure that remain in the public domain. We ask the county fully define the need for public facilities funding for schools, parks, stormwater, and bring that back to the community as part of the CIP. Give us a better plan that avoids gentrification and displacement. Do not choose a plan that leaves too much to chance, too much for private owners whose interests are not ours. Finally, we were not able to fully digest staff's 250-page update issued Thursday night, and we apologize. But we object also to reducing the speaker times from 5 to 3 minutes. We think the county and the PC can do better. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Aaron Roberts, who will be on video this evening.
Thank you. I'm sorry I was not able to come in person. Had a family medical emergency and had to look after a child. I just wanted to say thank you to county staff and the commissioners that have visited us and worked with us and listened to us. I've found this process to be very, very reciprocal, a lot of listening, and we've learned a lot in our community. And I just wanted to say thank you for balancing boldness with the principles of context-sensitive design. The latest draft, I think, was a remarkable step in the right direction. And I just wanted to be one of the voices amongst this group to just thank you for all of your efforts and your time and imagining a bright future for all of the new residents that will be welcoming to Arlington. Thank you. And I'll reserve my time for someone else. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jolie Pillsbury, followed by Diane Mahoney.
Good morning, afternoon, evening. I would like to thank very much the staff who have visited us, the members of this commission who have visited us, walked our site, and also the commissioners. For us, it was incredibly trust building to actually have conversations with people who are walking in our neighborhood and who we could share that this is not just a spot on a map, but it is people who live there, many of them for 20, 25 years or longer, others who've just moved in. Our neighborhood, which is the Palisades Park Association, welcomes new members. We support the vision of Plan Langston Boulevard. We are incredibly grateful to the staff for what they have done in the revisions that are before you. The reduced maximum height I believe will give us a compromise that gives us increased density, which we hope will result in affordable units in our neighborhood, not elsewhere. We also believe that an interest that you could express would be in reuse of buildings that could be used even for things like affordable home ownership, which we think is another path for people that would be very important to be included into the future, as well as subsidizing rents or other ways of providing affordable housing. We're very supportive of that. We also already meet the density requirements of the missing middle, and we have a very lovely tree canopy. So I thank you again for what you have done, and I hope you support what it is in the recommendations from the staff. Thank you.
Hello, my name is, I'm so sorry.
Oh, you're online, Ms. Mahoney?
Yes, ma'am. I'm so sorry. When I received the confirmation, it included the joining by Teams. So I thought that meant I wasn't allowed to come in public. This is
Okay.
my first time attending.
No
Would you like
problem.
me to wait?
No, you can speak now. Give us just one moment. Okay, Ms. Diane, we're gonna come back to you in just a moment.
Sure. No
And we're
worries.
gonna let someone else speak just before you so we can get this computer together. Grace Herpay. Thank you.
Cool. Hi, my name is Grace Jerpy. Last time I was here, I was Grace White. Decided to take my mom's name when I changed my legal name, so here we are. I wanted to say, in particular, I'm concerned that this plan will not meet the affordable housing master plan goal of 2,500 committed affordable units along the corridor by 2040. I'm glad to see that we'll hit those numbers by 2075, but I may be dead by then. In general, I don't think that Arlington focuses enough on that plan. We barely fund half of what we need to meet our goals for that plan, and this current version doesn't even reach half of the units we want by 2040. The solution to this is pretty simple. We need to allow more height. We can focus this height in areas near Metro, Area 5 West, and around activity hubs. We can relook at the East Falls Church area plan and Cherrydale plans to help us reach this goal. But I really want us to start with the question of what will it take for us to meet the affordable housing master plan goals, and then do that. When we add more height, we're going to have a lot of other good things too. We're going to make public transit a lot more viable along the corridor. We're going to get infrastructure improvements. We're going to get overland relief for stormwater. These things do not come cheap, and development pays for them. We've known this since the 50s, when Arlington studied our entire county and found that the apartments were subsidizing the non-apartment areas. That's where we got this whole transit-oriented development around the metro stops. And I think we should continue with this transit-oriented development along Langston. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Diane Mahoney, followed by Eli Khan.
Good evening. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak. My name is Diane Mahaney. I am a resident of Arlington County, but I'm speaking this evening on behalf of Rivendell School, which is a private school that is situated on Langston Boulevard. We are across from the current Lee Center, and our children use that school in partnership with use that space in partnership with the county for the playground, the open field space during our recesses and breaks. We also have many of our students are members of the community, and we have after school gatherings there, just community gatherings. We use the playground space a lot after hours for our families to spend time together. There is not a great deal of green space that is public playgrounds and the kickball, softball area, and just the open field. We don't have a lot of those spaces in this area of Langston Boulevard. And the current plan proposes either making it mixed use, making it stormwater detention development, and it would either completely erase or greatly reduce the amount of that space. We asked the county board to reconsider that, to maintain the public space that's there, the green space, and also to consider not putting buildings there that would increase the amount of traffic. Already that area, Kentucky, North Kentucky, does have a lot of traffic, but we use it well in partnership with the community members there for carpool pickup. A lot of our kids walk to school. And if some of the plans usages are adopted, that increases the density there. It would increase the traffic, and it would not be the safest place for our children to walk to and from school or cross from their carpools. So our main comments and requests are that the Lee Center green space, the playground, the open field use be
Thank
preserved.
you, Ms. Mahaney. Your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Eli Khan, followed by Natalie Roy.
Hi, my name is Eli Khan. I think that part of the reason this plan so far has been so or relatively well received is because I think there is a real sense of consensus around a lot of the objectives, especially having to do with transit-oriented development and more or safer streets, more bike and bus infrastructure, and more public spaces. And the fact is, in order to achieve those things that everyone wants, we really do need to increase the density. That's what gets us the possibility of making buses with shorter headways viable. That's what pays for all of these public spaces and all of these benefits that the county will be sort of leaning on developers to fund. So I think Area 5 in particular can accommodate more density, higher height limits, but I also think that the board has a number of different pathways it can use to achieve or to increase the density, whether it decides to go a more intensive route, concentrating it, or whether it decides it's more appropriate to sort of spread it out more. Either way, I think would be very beneficial. But the most important thing is to increase density to the point that would put us on a path to meeting the affordable housing production goals. Yeah, so thanks for hearing my comment. That's all.
Natalie Roy is followed by Jane Green.
Good evening. I am Natalie Roy, resident of Lyon Park for more than 32 years. I'm concerned about the lack of process with this request to advertise for the adoption of the Langston Boulevard Area Plan. There are beneficial aspects of this draft plan, including, among other things, improved bike and pedestrian lanes. There is, however, considerable densification that will result that requires further review. It is also surprising, given the critical shortage of affordable housing in the county, that the plan is not clear on the number of affordable housing units that will result from this effort. Everyone recognizes that this effort has been in the works for many years. More recently, PLB took a backseat to the missing middle debate, rebranded as EHO. However, just because this plan has been in the works for years, has had its fair share of hiccups and delays, and the current board sunsets at the end of the year, that is not a justification to rush this new unvetted version through. A good process is critical in getting support from Arlington residents. There is no way that a draft plan released on the evening of the 28th, last Thursday, with more than 1,300 changes and edits from the previous draft, can be reviewed and digested by key stakeholders in 2 business days for a vote tonight by the Planning Commission. Even if the 1,300 changes were identified, which they were not, that is not sufficient time to review a 200-page report. It is also imperative that other county advisory commissions have time to review and weigh in on this specific draft. A plan this consequential deserves the time to be reviewed by key stakeholders and residents countywide. Arlington needs to get back to its comprehensive planning roots and can start tonight with the Planning Commission. Thank you very much.
Jane Green is followed by John Musso.
Hi, my name is Jane Green. I live near and travel along Langston Boulevard about once a week. I support the Langston Boulevard area plan because Arlington's northernmost corridor deserves to be a showcase neighborhood. The people who live there now deserve walkable, bikeable streets, mixed-use development, plazas, and parks. They deserve to have integrated schools. All Arlingtonians deserve a chance to live along Langston Boulevard. I support increasing allowable heights, especially at the Lee Harrison Shops in Area 2 and at the Air Force Association site in Area 5, which is less than 10-minute walk from Roslyn Metro. We shouldn't shut down a potentially viable building before the developer has even had a chance to work with the community on stepbacks. I urge you to request that the county board direct staff to revive the multifamily reinvestment study and to be bold to find ways to preserve affordable housing and to establish a budget to update the plans in Cherrydale and East Falls Church. These should be top priorities for the staff work plans in the coming years. Finally, I ask that you ask the staff to begin a comprehensive review of all the potential tools needed to bring more affordable housing to Langston Boulevard. It is not acceptable to have this area plan knowingly fail to meet the geographic distribution goals of the Affordable Housing Master Plan. The Langston Boulevard area plan is setting the limit on what can be built for decades. It has already taken too long to end up with something that might not be enough. We need entire reformation of our paradigm for planning. Something that right now treats density as a problem to be managed rather than an opportunity. People are not a burden. Thank you.
Our next speaker is John Musso, followed by Timothy Dugan.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. I'm John Musso, Government Affairs Manager at the Arlington Chamber of Commerce and former resident of the Langston Boulevard corridor. On behalf of the Chamber, I'm here tonight requesting that the Commission motion to advertise public hearings for the adoption of the area plan, the GLUP amendment, zoning amendment, and master transportation plan amendments. The Chamber has been a strong supporter of originally planned Langston Boulevard and the broad goal of encouraging smart, sustainable economic and commercial development along this corridor. And we recognize that this is finally the culmination of a decade-long effort on the part of the community, of neighborhoods, and the county to finally realize this area plan. We appreciate that in addition to the area plan being considered here tonight, we also appreciate that it includes GLUP map and GLUP designations, as well as some of the zoning ordinance amendments within the RTA that we think are really essential in order to ensure that we have a significant impact once this plan is finally passed. The Chamber has been advocating ever since the release of the draft plan to incorporate elements of the zoning and GLUP amendments into the final plan in order to make sure that once this plan is finally adopted, it can be immediately effective and immediately encouraging the kind of development that we want. So we greatly appreciate staff in the county for recognizing that and moving that in the direction. We do urge the Planning Commission to make sure that the county board directs staff to promptly move to finish the remainder of these needed GLUP and zoning amendments as soon as possible following the adoption of the plan, as we feel that it's really essential to make the clarity that I think a lot of development really requires. In addition, we do also hope that the Planning Commission is mindful that the corridor depends on a balance of commercial and residential development. So we want the Commission to keep that in mind. So thank you all very much for your time.
I'm sorry, our last in person is Mr. Timothy Dugan.
Good evening. My name's Timothy Dugan. I'm with the law firm of Bean, Kinney and Corman. We represent two property owners, one who owns the Lion Village Shopping Center and the other that owns the Lion Village Apartments. And with my 2 minutes, I just want to mention, we submitted today letters for both properties, two separate letters, and I'm going to touch on them briefly. First off, thanks very much for the planning staff for all their work and hard work. We've explained things with them, we discussed things, and many changes were responses to matters that we raised in the course of the summertime were reflected in the plan, and we appreciate the very, very hard work for that. With respect to Lion Village Shopping Center, it's a very unique location for the plan. It's at the juncture of many vehicular, pedestrian, and roadway transportation things right in the middle of the plan. It's also located at the confluence of many significant stormwater outfall from the upper regions of the plan. Its position is a major component of the Spout Run Activity Hub, and it has an unusual triangular shape, which has posed issues for us to work with. We have some comments in the letter that indicates that we want to touch on the Greenway. With respect to the Lion Village Apartments, the main point we want to make is that we believe that the proper category for that is partial preservation, not full preservation. The physical limitations of the property are not suitable for renovation. And they're also, that would conform it with other recommendations in the plan having to do with 4- and 7-story development there. So thanks very much for your attention.
Our next speaker, in the order that your name is called, these will be virtual speakers. Juan Carlos, followed by Jason Herrera.
Good evening. My name is Juan Carlos Fierro, and I live in the Virginia Square, Boston neighborhood. I am also a candidate for the Arlington County Board. I come to you tonight to bring out 3 concerns I have about the plan, Langston Boulevard, that the Planning Commission is considering tonight. 1, the lack of full transparency given that the latest draft plan, 2,005 pages with over 1,300 changes, was issued only last Friday, with no summary statement of the changes that have been incorporated into the latest draft. Notwithstanding the merits of some of the changes, it is impossible for the average Joe to understand what are the changes that have been incorporated in the document. My major concern is that changes may have been incorporated without adequate explanation, notwithstanding the public engagement efforts the county has conducted. The Arlington public deserves to know what these 1,300 changes are before this plan moves forward. 2, it is not at all clear if major concerns expressed by citizens have truly been incorporated into the final report, limiting building heights to no more than 7 floors, as opposed to the 10 and 12 floors as advocated by staff. Clarifying the role BDOT on Langston, given that they have jurisdiction over the roadway since it is a US 29, and commitments to meaningful project impact analysis of proposed projects to go beyond negotiating with the developers for community benefits in a piecemeal approach. A summary report on what are the changes to the draft will answer several of these and other concerns. Number 3, I am concerned about the restrictions that are being imposed on public engagement that have been reduced public comment to only 2 minutes, not allowing for anyone in the community to provide an in-depth analysis of some of their concerns. This limitation gives the public the perception that the public engagement is nothing more than a check the boxes exercise, and that the country truly does not want true public engagement. Given that in a few weeks there will be an election of new board members for the county board, I recommend that the vote be delayed until the 2 lame duck board seats are filled by the winners of the November election and the public has time to read and understand what is actually being voted on the 205-page document. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Carlos. The next speaker is Jason Herrera, followed by Ginger Brown. Jason Herrera, followed by Ginger Brown online, please. Okay. Ginger, you can go ahead and speak now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Ginger Brown. I'm the Executive Director of the Langston Boulevard Alliance. First, I want to say thank you to staff and congratulations on getting to the RTA. I want to just thank staff because there have been a tremendous amount of changes in this document. So I was happy when I was reviewing it. The community's vision, going back to the beginning of the grassroots effort in 2012, is to create inclusive, walkable, community-serving commercial hubs that support small businesses and create a sense of place. First, we're very encouraged that the plan now includes the promotion of publicly accessible parking to support the large geographic base of customers that patronize the businesses. Staff will actively coordinate parking agreements and create a park once experience along the corridor. However, we believe the retail maps need some minor changes, including the extension of gold to the Lehigh shops. Additionally, it's very encouraging that the plan now calls for 10-minute headways, making it possible to live on the corridor without a car, as well as a new focus on complete streets and Vision Zero safety improvements. Intersections like Spout Run, which need immediate attention for safety and flooding, should be included in the next CIP. LBA is encouraged by the improved requirements for tree canopy and the ability to use TDRs for resource protection areas and in floodplains. However, the year 2025 is a long time to wait for solutions to urban flooding, and we hope that's expedited. LBA is skeptical on combining the community centers given the number of households that will be added to the corridor. Our centers, LAC, Langston Brown, the Gray House, Dawson Terrace, should remain as publicly funded and operated community resources. And all of the existing green space, including passive open space, should remain green. Additionally, consideration should be given to the John M. Langston Citizens Association's forthcoming application for a historic designation with the goal to encourage longevity and preservation of the Halls Hill Highview Park neighborhood as one of the remaining historically Black neighborhoods in Arlington as the corridor revitalizes. Special consideration should be given to the neighborhood's wishes when it comes to height and to the pace of change. Finally, LBA is encouraged by added tools to achieve affordable housing, including TDRs and the targeted use of AHIF for land acquisition. Now is the time to scour the corridor in search of new future affordable housing properties that will help the corridor achieve its goals. However, we still believe that the East Falls Church and Cherrydale plans should be moved from the long range to the short range category in the implementation framework. We will be sending in more detailed comments, but thank you and good work.
Thank you. Our next speaker, these will be 2-minute speakers, John Obenberger, followed by Ann Umschneider.
Hi, are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. We appreciate everybody's hard work and time. Thank you for the opportunity to make remarks tonight. I'd appreciate any change that's made to the land use plan, not address and incorporate the density that's proposed right now for Area 5. Go back to what was proposed in 2022. It was a more reasonable density and transition off of Langston Boulevard. Similarly, less impact on the fringes of Lion Village to the south. Staff did an analysis. Severe congestion will result with the plan. They glossed over it's not included in the plan and is going to be substantial congestion. so much congestion that VDOT is likely never going to approve only going to 2 lanes. You'll need to keep 3 lanes if you're going to put a bike lane there. And for the number of bikers that would use the facility, it doesn't warrant it. You're going to be looking at an environmental impact statement and several years of public involvement assessing all the impacts of the proposed development. So while you may have a target for or goal for affordable housing, it's got to be met with what the impacts it would cause on the corridor. And fortunately, VDOT will be the adult in the room and require the appropriate analysis of all impacts to be made. You also need to look at what the costs are going to be for all the public infrastructure that's proposed in the plan, because I can tell you, I've been doing this for 40 years. Developers are not going to pay for all the public improvements that are going to be needed that appear in the plan, like Ann Bodine mentioned. You're going to end up with no reduction in lanes on Langston Boulevard, no public infrastructure development, and all you're going to get is the added density and all the problems that are going to occur with it. Suggests that you require an assessment of all the public costs that would support the development, and then go back and look at what appropriate density would be able to be balanced.
Thank you, Mr. Oldenburger.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ann Schneider, followed by Susan Cunningham.
Good evening. My name is Ann Schneider, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of Voice, Virginians Organized for Interfaith Community Engagement. I'm also a resident of Arlington, have lived here since 1976. And I've watched the affordable housing go up, particularly along the Columbia Pike corridor, and was really hopeful that the Langston Boulevard planning would result in the affordable units that were targeted in the 2015 plan. That would be the 2,500 units that other speakers have mentioned, and that be achieved by 2040. As Voice has listened to families around the county, we constantly hear about families doubling up in apartments, spending way too much of their income on rent, 40 to 50% or more. And we need to have people at the lower income levels in our county. We need the people who are school aides, custodians, bus drivers, child care workers. We are in this together. We depend on each other. And those folks all need places to live. The Langston Boulevard corridor offers a great opportunity for that. And that would mean offering maximum flexibility when affordable units are constructed, such as lot size, lot consolidation, perhaps co-locating affordable housing with county or school facilities, and incentives for additional height or density bonus. To help secure the 2,500 affordable units that are needed, the county board should make a firm commitment to an immediate review and update of both the East Falls Church and Cherrydale area plans. This is a rare opportunity to add a substantial number of new units to meet the affordable housing target goal.
Thank
And,
you, Ms. Schneider. Your
Thank
time
you.
is up. Suzanne Cunningham is followed by Eric Mapelli. Susan Cunningham. Okay. Eric Mapelli.
Hi, my name is Eric Malpelli. I'm involved with several groups here in Arlington County, but I'm speaking today just as an individual resident. My family and I live along Glebe Road, just 1 block north of Langston Boulevard. I think what you have before you is a very good plan that will improve the quality of life for current and future residents along the corridor. There is an opportunity, however, to make a few small changes that would make it even better. First is to highlight the need for improved pedestrian safety for those walking east-west across Glebe Road. From the intersection of Langston and Glebe to the next crosswalk at 26th Street is 2/5 of a mile, which is a very long distance for individuals to walk, forcing many to jaywalk dangerously across the street. Similarly, there are opportunities to improve pedestrian safety on Old Dominion to slow down speeding, another key east-west pedestrian route. Second, there's room to better coordinate Plan Langston with other plans going on in Arlington County. Specifically, the Arlington Transit Strategic Plan, currently underway, proposes a redesign of ART service that would eliminate ART Route 72, which runs from North Arlington down Glebe Road to Langston Boulevard and then onward to Ballston Metro. It would replace it with a route that does not connect Langston Boulevard to Ballston Metro. This is the time to be improving connection between a densifying area along Langston and the metro system, not to remove it. Lastly, I'd just like to thank the county staff for their outstanding work on the plan and their commitment to the community. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Terry Amayo, followed by Audrey Clement.
I was virtual. Hi, can you guys hear me? Yes? Yes. I'm sorry, that's really confusing. The feedback.
Do you have a phone with you or anything?
I have nothing on me.
Okay, you can go ahead now.
Yeah, this plan is interesting. I would say there's a few things that could make it better. Number one, an evacuation route is just that. It's there so that people can leave in case of an emergency. And I don't know how many people lived here on 9/11. I did. The airplane went right over my house and then flew right into the Pentagon and the house shook. And guess what? I packed bags, dogs, and kids, and we were heading west to get out of here because this is a target zone. You're literally proposing to take a major evacuation street on a road that you don't even manage or own and make it so people cannot safely evacuate. You would be jeopardizing tens of thousands of lives. Because I got to tell you, it's not if, it's when. We have good security agencies, but something's going to slip by and people are going to get killed and they're going to look back here and they're going to go, what are we doing? So you really need to rethink that piece of the Green Street narrowing bike lanes, because nobody's going to be looking for a bus. Nobody's going to be getting their kids and bags and jumping on their bike to leave town. They're getting in their cars and they're out of here. So I got to tell you that my friends now call Arlington a builder's bonanza, and that seems like it's what it's become. It's really unbelievable. But as respect to the height of 15 stories in some renderings that I saw with glass, this is a major migration route. In fact, we're in migration season, and these developers are going to put up literal bird killing buildings, and y'all are going to let it happen. I hope you don't. Thank you.
Our next speaker online is Audrey Clements.
Yes, my name is Audrey Clement. I'm an independent candidate for Arlington County Board. The county has just released a new 205-page plan, Langston Boulevard, with more than 1,300 changes from the June version. The Planning Commission is now being asked to vote on a request to advertise this revised plan. Staff had provided little explanation of the changes. Other commissions have had no opportunity to weigh in. How can anyone reasonably say that this is a responsible process, considering that the previous draft plan Langston Boulevard was itself unwieldy and hard to follow? As a candidate for county board, I asked the Planning Commission to delay a vote until the 2 lame duck board seats are filled by the winners of the November election. and the public has had time to read and understand what is actually being voted on. In the meantime, the Planning Commission should ask staff to prepare a document summarizing the changes to the PLB with a rationale for any major changes. And finally, I want to comment on what speakers have said about the proposed 2,500 units that was contained in a plan that was issued in 2015. That plan predated the missing middle EHO ordinance that was just adopted by the county. So clearly that number needs to be reviewed. It is not set in stone. And of great concern to me is the fact that not only is there no mention of the EHO ordinance in the latest version of PLB, but in an earlier version, it was stipulated that there would be no coordination or attempt to discuss these two plans together. And I think this represents a total lack of intelligent planning on the part of the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Justin Sadowski, followed by Michael Heminger.
Hi, my name is Justin Sadowski. I'm a civil rights lawyer. I've lived in Arlington for 12 years and in the Donaldson Run area. And my two children, 9 years old and 11 years old, have had the great fortune of being able to go to Taylor Elementary School and now Dorothy Ham Middle School. These are fantastic schools. I've gotten to watch them develop into fantastic people. But the problem is that in order for residents or anybody to afford to go to these schools, they need to be able to buy into $1 million single family homes. More people deserve what I have been fortunate, what I have been blessed with, the ability to go to these schools. And so when I hear people complain about the character of the neighborhood, I think we're better than that. I think we can build more housing of different types to allow more diversity in these schools and give more people the opportunity to have what we in the community have been blessed with. It frustrates me and saddens me that we hear people complain about the character of the neighborhood in trying to keep people out of this, and even more so hearing people, including people running for public office, that they would avoid affordable housing in areas with the great schools that Arlington has. I urge the board to approve Langston, Plan Langston in its most expensive way, and I yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Michael Heminger, followed by Wells Harrell.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is Mike Heminger. I'm the president of the NAACP Arlington branch. We hope you found time to review our letter that we sent to you last week. I'm here tonight to reiterate those concerns on behalf of the thousands of residents of color who could potentially benefit from this plan with the proper refinements. While we believe in the vision of what Plan Langston Boulevard can accomplish, we have significant concerns about the county's own ability to meet its affordable housing goals. These goals were not simply ascribed to us, they were goals that we ourselves, we studied and avowed to do more. Of greater concern is the version recently released last week ahead of the RTA removes all estimates of affordable housing production. It's undisputed that Langston Boulevard desperately needs more affordable homes. Arlington's population is less racially diverse than the larger Washington region, and this specific planning area is less racially diverse than the county as a whole. We know that market forces will continue to push housing costs to unattainable levels, and we'll see an acceleration of displacement in our communities of color. We have significant concerns about this acceleration. The plan is short over 600 affordable homes. Additionally, the plan does not do enough to address the need for deeply affordable housing, including for households earning less than 60% of AMI. Please probe this. This is a crisis, as is the equal geographic distribution of these homes, as Ms. Jones has already stated. The data has demonstrated time and time again that those who stand to lose the most will be our communities of color. To quote the letter we sent you, the plan presents a once-in-a-generation opportunity to create homes for families that have long been denied the opportunity to live in some of the county's most exclusive neighborhoods. It's not enough to hope that staff's projections are conservative or that the shortfall in affordable homes can be addressed in other plans that could take years to revise, or that legacy businesses will find a way to survive on their
Thank you,
own.
Mr. Heminger. Thank you. Our next speaker is Wells Harrell. Last speaker.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Wells Harrell. I'm an Arlington East Falls Church resident. I live about a block or two from Langston Boulevard, and I support advertising Plan Langston Boulevard with two sets of changes in order to better realize the plan's goals for affordable housing and transportation. First, I want to associate myself with the comments of the speakers tonight who have called for a more ambitious approach to affordable housing in the plan so that ultimately it can meet by 2040 the goals of the Affordable Housing Master Plan. While I agree that the residents of the John and Langston Citizens Association should be given due weight in their preferences, that in other respects, the plan should be changed in the advertisement so that meeting the Affordable Housing Master Plan goals isn't just possible, it's actually a reality that we can expect, especially for the deeply affordable homes that are desperately needed in the corridor. Next, we've also heard comments, including in the discussion with the Transportation Commission, about the need for an end-to-end complete main street in the Langston Boulevard corridor. Not simply some nodes that are disconnected from each other and might have some individual safety features for each of them, but in fact, at a minimum, 10 minutes bus headways, end-to-end infrastructure for pedestrians and bicyclists that allow for complete connectivity, not just within the nodes, but between them all along the corridor. In order to make this into a place that people truly can get out of their cars to enjoy and reduce our car dependency, we need to be bold, we need to be aggressive. And so I want to thank the work that the staff has done for presenting this vision for a green main street. And I would urge the Planning Commission to recommend changes to it to help make that a better chance of becoming a reality. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, is that everyone?
Yes, I was going to do a last call for Ms. Cunningham, but I did not get a response, so we can move on with the discussion. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. The matter is with the commission.
Excuse me, I
Thank you,
registered.
everyone.
Excuse me, I registered and was told that I could speak virtually. May I speak for 2 minutes?
I'm sorry, what is your name?
Tim Hewson.
I'm sorry, I do not have your name on our register, sir. You will have another opportunity next month when the item comes for adoption. Thank you.
I'm sorry, but you did email me and tell me that I could speak.
Can you email it back to me?
Sure.
Thank you. Please turn your mic off in the meantime. Okay, Madam Chair, I just received a response from Suzanne Cunningham. She's having some difficulty with the phone, I suppose. I don't know how you want to handle that. Let's see. She was trying to, let's see. Looks like, my apologies, I inadvertently left Mr. Houston off. So he did get a confirmation from me.
So, Mr. Houston, why don't you proceed? In the meantime, if we can get Ms. Cunningham, we will. And if we're unable to get Ms. Cunningham by the time Mr. Houston's time has expired, the matter will come to the commission and Ms. Cunningham can just submit her comments in writing. Thank you. Mr. Houston, we apologize. Please proceed.
No problem. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes.
My name's Tim Hewson. I live with my family 100 yards from Langston Boulevard in Maywood, where we've owned a single family house for 11 years. I applaud the efforts of the county planning staff and everyone involved in Plan Langston Boulevard. First and foremost, just turn the camera on. First and foremost, I encourage you to be ambitious in incorporating as much residential density as practical to help solve our housing shortage. Second, I encourage you to be more ambitious regarding one specific block that faces Lee Heights shops in Area 3. I'm referring to the block immediately north of and across from Lee Heights shops. Make that small block, which now holds just a 7-Eleven and a closed bank branch, into a public square rather than another building. The draft area plan says on page 35 that the streets in front of Lee Heights shops will be designed as a shared space that can be closed for special events. That street already is closed for special events. The illustrations on pages 39 and 40 show the Area 3 central public space to be confined to what is just a traffic island, plus what looks like a widened sidewalk, all surrounded by 7-story buildings. A public square on this block would turn Lee Heights into a smaller version of Clarendon's Square. On the current draft plan, it looks like a smaller version of Virginia Square, where there's no real square, but just buildings. A Lee Heights Square would make this block a destination rather than just one more of the residential buildings planned for Area 3. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, were we able to get Ms. Cunningham?
No, we were not.
Okay, thank you. So,
Thank you.
Ms. Cunningham, if you can hear us, please submit your comments in writing. We look forward to receiving them. The matter is now with the commission. Are there any reports from any of our liaisons? Transportation?
The Transportation Commission has not heard this particular draft yet. We had an information session a month ago, but this particular draft has not been vetted yet by TC.
Thank you so much. Okay, so let's move on.
It did come in front of Zoco, but I did submit a report, so hopefully that covers it.
Yep, that's fine. It also came before LRPC. We're just thinking about outside commission
Okay.
liaisons. All right, so what I think to plan for today's conversation, today we are here on the RTA, friends, and I've created a list of things that I think that probably can encompass all of our discussion, but I'm going to run through it with you guys so you can let me know what's missing. Okay, all right. So first bucket, housing, which would include supply and affordability. Second, density, form, and heights. Third, East Falls Church, Cherrydale Revitalization Districts, GLUP, and existing land use plans. Fourth, transportation, which would include transit, facilities, infrastructure, parking, and roads. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, historical cultural resources, preservation. Next will be public spaces. And then last on my list is, but not least, certainly, sustainability and resilience. This would include other infrastructure, including stormwater and tree canopy. Is there anything that you feel is not included within the, and another catch-all that would not fit neatly into one of these buckets, including the question that you raised earlier? Do you have another one?
No, but
It'll be-
I wanted to highlight that as process because I do think that should be
Okay.
its own topic.
Okay, process.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? No? All right, let's start with process because I think there's only one or two questions there. Yes, ma'am.
We've heard several times tonight, and it certainly is a powerful talking point, that a revised draft came out on Thursday. This is Monday. I spend a lot of time looking at calendars. That's not many days later. Is there a response with regards to the timing of that? I think that it is, saying that 1,300 changes or something, I don't think that's a complete telling of the story. So I'd like to hear from staff and get a chance to kind of understand better the timing of sort of what brought us to today. And separately, I would like to know when transportation is hearing this version, or is it scheduled for that? I just kind of to understand some of that timing as well. But staff first, then Commissioner, then tell me. Thank you.
All right, so thank you, Commissioner. In terms of the timing and the process for getting to this draft, we recognize that there's never enough time either to process, to address, or even make changes for staff. But we've been having these discussions, I would say, for a number of months now, particularly related to the things that led to the PCP, and then following the PCP, the June draft. And then after we released the June draft, there was a series of meetings, which I enumerated which ones those were, where we provided plenty of opportunity, we feel, for input. We certainly received a lot of feedback online in written forms. That doesn't mean that it all ends there. This has been an evolution, a sort of a building up of, let's say, recommendations. There have been substantial changes, but from our perspective, those changes really address a lot of the comments that we've heard from all of the commissions, specifically in the county board in the recent 4 or 5 weeks. That doesn't mean that there isn't any time, to process and to continue to review this draft that's out before you. We have another 4 weeks or 5 weeks before this goes to you all for review, and there's certainly an opportunity to continue to delve into the details. A lot of the content that's in the plan today is still the same from what was there before. There's just been a lot of refinements to policies. There hasn't been any changes to maps or things that would constitute major rehauls, but more so, I think, clarifications and additional policies to address some of the concerns that people have stated. So hopefully that, I don't know if anybody else from staff.
I'm very appreciative of that. I think that while I understand that it was more a process of refinements and we're not talking about wholly new documentation or new maps or such, I do think that it is an unfortunate timeline that leads us to the first planning commission meeting essentially 2 business days after a major revision came out, that I think for folks who don't read this kind of documentation regularly, and not everyone is a planning commissioner who likes to do this in their free time because we are volunteers. I think that would be a document that would be a struggle for most people to get through in that period of time. And I think that we should aim to do better, because I think that's important for the community to trust the process. So, I appreciate that this is the request to advertise. And again, that's another process piece that a lot of people don't engage with. So that's also something new. And this will come back for, final discussion and vote in a month it's what's anticipated. I might consider, based on sort of the timeline and pushing the changes, I would potentially be looking to make a motion that we have a longer period for advertisement, maybe 60 days instead of 30 for this, due to, kind of baking in some of that additional timeline where it might have felt a little bit rushed. And I have not floated that to other commissioners yet, but that's something that y'all can think about now while I get some words together on that. Because I do think that we as a county should do better for ourselves and our residents. So thank you.
For transportation, this will be, the next Transportation Commission meeting is October 26th. I do not know if this will be on the agenda. I'm presuming that it will be, because it'll be the last time, because TC did indicate its interest in hearing this.
Yes.
When we got the informational presentation. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And I believe we said that we would be happy to come at the end of the month.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Actually, staff is planning to attend a number of commissions before this goes forward for final consideration before the board in November. And we will be releasing attachment 6 a little bit later this week. And that will lay out some of the staff responses in addition to the comments that we heard. Just needing some additional time to pull all of that together, but we really represented much of the community concerns in the staff report.
I don't think it's necessary, but I know we always make an effort and we do a good job of engaging with our different commissions. Again, I know the intentionality, and I know we've all worked with staff very closely on this and other items. And so to have that level of engagement, I know is a priority. So when the timeline doesn't tell that story, I think that we need to ask questions. And that's what I'm doing here. So I don't know that other members of the commission would want a longer period for advertisement. They may not feel that's necessary. I think that's one thing to consider because of the timeline that we're looking at over the last several days. So thank you. I don't know if others have questions on this topic or not.
So just to clarify too, staff has been meeting with commissions and briefings through late August into September. And in fact, even briefings that occurred last week. So we've been continuing to receive feedback. We will continue to receive feedback all the way until this goes forward to the county board. Right now on track for November, but that's the board's direction that they'll provide when they take up the request to advertise.
And I appreciate that. I know you've gone to, many different commissions. I know that work has been ongoing and you had presentations with the community. I attended some of those. Changes are changes. Thank you.
Thank you. So Ms. Bagley, you want to be heard on this, and I'll just go ahead.
I just want to align myself with Commissioner Steinberger's comments. So this level 6 or report 6 that it will be coming out because some of the people who have commented tonight about this, in my opinion, too short a time frame to respond. They didn't necessarily attend all of the commission meetings. They may have attended other meetings. Will you be specifying, or is somebody putting together a report of exactly what these 1,300 refinements have been so that somebody can intelligibly look at that and see how it might affect them and their opinions on this?
Yeah, that's a valid question. And yes, the staff sort of comment matrix, the comment staff response matrix that we're pulling together, as Jen said, we just needed some time to make sure that all of the comments that we had heard were captured, because as you saw tonight, I presented the issues at a very high level, and a lot of them got consolidated and grouped under various topics. But in that report, all of those issues will be listed very comprehensively, and the actual changes that were made to the report, either to the plan, policies, or recommendations or strategies, will be identified there. So it's easy to see what's changed as a result of that.
Yeah, and I would take it one step further. She was a little bit more polite than I probably would be. I hope we never do this again. I hope we give this more time in the future, regardless of what the topic
Understood.
is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, and so I just again want to orient ourselves to where we are. We are on the request to advertise. So on a level here, we are scoping the parameters of Plan Langston Boulevard. And so what that means is we have held lots of meetings in our various internal committees. There are many committees of the whole body of this planning commission, as you all know, because all of you were there. And then there are other commissions within this county that have also heard meetings or had held meetings with regard to Plan Langston Boulevard. And people have been invited to those meetings in addition to our meetings. And staff has collected comments, and there's no real, I understand my colleagues' concerns here, but there's no real way to make sure that we can get a plan out in time for our scheduled hearings, and also make sure that we are giving real-time information to people in a plan as quickly as possible. Let me say that a different way. I think that staff did the best job that they could do by getting a comprehensive plan together with up-to-date information, reconciling the comments that they have been hearing from every single meeting of this body and other bodies, and being able to provide it as in advance of this meeting as possible. And with the procedural posture of this hearing, which is, again, the request to advertise, a scoping hearing, I would not be in agreement with moving this hearing or moving a vote on the request to advertise for 30 days. I know Mr. Weir wants to comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, for my colleagues, I agree with the chair. I don't think that I would support a recommendation to the county board that they address that they postpone the RTA to the November 11 meeting, which would then in turn postpone the adoption or action on the plan itself to their December 16 meeting. I think that I think that that might invite and raise more issues with participation and the opportunity for people to be heard in the December meeting. But I think more fundamentally, I think there are two things that are true, right? One thing that's true is that we definitely do need to get back to where we were. We're here in person, and we're back to where we were in that aspect before the pandemic. And I think that we need to get back to where we were with respect to another aspect, which is the expectation that we're going to get the materials, 7 to 10 days out. And we've been harping on that. And I think that, I really do think that is the time. The other thing that is true is I completely agree with your comments about the work, where we are in the posture and the work that has gone in. I mean, this plan, I think I would be coming out on differently if we were talking about a boilerplate, a relatively uncomplicated SPRC process where there's significant community impact, but we've only been talking about it for 6 to 9 months. This is a and with respect to Commissioner Bagley and Commissioner Steinberger, this is a plan that has been under discussion for, depending on how you're going to count the dates, a year to 2 years to 10 years, right? I mean, I remember Ms. Brown coming and speaking, I think during one of my first few meetings as a planning commissioner on this topic. So I think that there has not been any lack of notice, and that the indicia of process, I think that I don't think that saying that just because this form of the document wasn't published, before a certain day out, I don't think it follows from that there hasn't been a full and robust public process on that. At least for the purposes of moving forward on the RTA, and mindful of the fact that even if the board were to move forward on the RTA this month, there would still be another 30 days. So I've gone on long enough, but that's where I am. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Commissioner Lantami.
I'd like to add my voice to the chairs and Commissioner Weir. This process actually goes back 11 years. I was there at the beginning. So and this was started from a community process rather than top down. It was from bottom up. So, I've been involved in this all along. When the last draft was released by the staff in June, it wasn't as though nothing happened after that. There were numerous meetings, community meetings, individual meetings, small group meetings all through the summer, briefings of other commissions. There was also a county board work session a few weeks ago, which was a substantive working session where the county board weighed in with quite a number of items that I see reflected in the latest draft. So there was work being done on this, changes being made constantly over the past 3 months. And yeah, I would have preferred more than just a few days too. So I can't disagree with you on that at all. But it's not as though these changes weren't necessary, but they're also not fundamental changes. I have gone through all 205 pages. The changes are for the better. They are in response to community concerns, from county board concerns, from stakeholder concerns that we've been hearing here. The county did listen. I also analogize this to the Pentagon City sector plan, where changes were made in that literally up to the final board meeting for the final approval. Changes were made literally hours before that meeting. So because this is an RTA, it's sort of a fault tolerant thing, that if we're not thrilled with something, it's okay, because the idea is to sort of get everything out there. We can cut it back later. We can't add to it, but we can cut it back later. So I'm more than willing to move ahead with this, and I don't feel it's necessary to delay it an extra month. Thank you.
Commissioner Berkey?
Just be brief and say I concur with you, Madam Chair, and Commissioners Weir and Lantami. And I think it's It's very inspiring. Is that the word? I think a lot of the changes that we saw in this last draft were really things we talked about at that last LRPC in ZOCO meeting that we had about a week and a half ago. And so I think, as Jim was saying, a lot of things are being done in real time that staff is trying to address. And so again, would have liked more time to review, but I think that's always going to be the case. Thanks.
Mr. Steinberger?
Thank you. I just want to clarify that my reason for pushing that we should do better is because the substance of what we're doing is so important that I don't want to give credence to superficial timing arguments, which I think we didn't do ourselves any favors with this time around because of when things were released and the timing for this meeting. That's the point that I wanted to make. If my fellow commissioners don't think that an additional delay on the RTA timing is necessary, I respect that. I will consider whether or not to make such a motion. But I think the point is simply that we should not open ourselves up to an argument in that regard. And we certainly did that and more this time around. That was what I was trying to get out. So thank you.
Okay, any more on process? Wonderful. Housing? Questions, thoughts, comments on housing? Yes, ma'am.
So at the July 25th meeting, and in the interest of time, those of us who still had some questions were asked to email them, and I did. And then I brought this back up on September 5th. I still don't have the answer to this question. So my question at that time was about, quote, removing housing conservation districts in favor of multifamily housing. And I wondered what that might look like. What's an explanation of that? Are there specific districts that are named here? And, what happens if there are people in those districts? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. We have Kelly online who will be able to answer that. If not, I can just jump in with a short, brief comment. Sure, I'll get started and then Kelly can join in and add to that. In terms of the HCD, you may realize or notice in the map that is in the implementation section that there are portions within the core area that also overlap, or let's say the HCD boundaries also overlap with, the entire core area. And so there are a few locations where there would be inconsistencies. And so one of the things that we wanted to clarify was that those parcels that are inside the planning, the core study area, which are the areas that are being proposed for change, and that are also in the HCD, the planning recommendations would be different. This plan recommends more multifamily housing. And so the goal is to increase density in those areas and having them be part also of the HCD, which is trying to conserve, or let's say preserve housing, would be an inconsistency. And so that's just part of cleaning up the map to make sure that we're not creating conflicting policies and goals and strategies.
In other words, we're not at this point taking anything away from somebody. This is because there's an overlap and just the way thank you.
Right.
Well, I'll defer. I mean, I sort of would like to go through those slides again. So I'm happy to defer because my question is really if we can go through, there's two slides that Natasha went through as far as the CAFs that are going to be generated by 2075 and sort of how you all came up with that number. But I'm happy to defer that conversation if you have a question.
Do you have a question?
It might be, I do. Yeah. It might actually end up being the same question. But I was hoping that staff could speak a little bit to the decision to look to a 60% AMI threshold instead of a 30% AMI threshold, which is, I'm sorry?
30% threshold.
That's what, yes, the chair is correct. The other way around. That's, an increasingly common question. So would love it if you could speak to that decision a little bit.
So just to clarify, make sure I understood the question you're asking, whether we've clarified that we want to try to seek deeper affordability levels below the 60, including the 30%.
Yes, and if the lack of understanding is on me, I please accept my apologies. But there was that one slide, and this is why I said it might be the same question that pointed to a 60% cutoff. And My understanding
Two,
is,
two slides, one that talks about our goals at 60%, but then there's a second slide, or maybe it's on the same slide, it's in the yellow box, where it says that we are looking to consider moving into a space where we're thinking about affordable housing at lower than
At lower,
60%.
yes.
And
Okay.
so I guess, so I think all three of our questions,
all the same question.
we may be all trying to figure out how do we more normalize it to being below 60% instead of looking at it always at 60%? That's my
Sure.
question. I don't know if that's y'all's
Well,
question.
and I just want to know how we got there with the
Yeah,
60 and the 80% AMI CAFs.
okay.
And I want to know what are the, like, what are the unique, what if any are the unique features about Langston Boulevard that would make 30% not unfeasible, not feasible?
Infeasible.
I mean, we heard for a long time with Barcroft that 30% wasn't feasible. And now there's efforts to make 30% work out, at least in some aspects. So if that's not going to work out on Langston Boulevard, is it because of the size of the lots? Is it because of the height? Is it because of, what's it because of?
Or has that determination been made as well? Like that it, so I guess first, how did we get to the 60 to 80?
These in the 80s, right?
Right. Second is there something that made, is there some determination that has been made that says that we cannot get under 60? And if that determination hasn't been made, is there some way to start normalizing our goals to be under 60 to move into that direction? And I think that, and to complicate this a little bit further, I think Commissioner Peterson may even have another question that's right on point here. Is that right or no?
Yeah, well, I was interested in, the staff report talks about the affordable housing potential supply in the next 30 years, but then there are blank spaces. And then in the presentation, you were talking about 2075. So I was interested more in the shorter term, like how much affordable housing are we going to get? Do you have those numbers yet?
Okay, so we'll hold off on Commissioner Peterson's then. How about these first couple? She tricked me.
Sure. Do you want us to pull up the slide?
Yes, please, that'd be helpful.
All right. So in the meantime, while we do that, I'm going to turn it over to Richard for some of the high level questions and we can go back to the numbers.
Sure. I'm Richard Tucker. I'm with the Housing Division. So talking about 60% versus 30%, to keep in mind, we target 60% AMI for all of our affordable housing projects. As the target for in the zoning ordinance and the affordable housing ordinance in terms of units, CAFs that are created by developers as well. But we also strive to achieve affordability at 30% of AMI as well, as a subset of all the units that we create that are affordable. In order to achieve units at 30% of median, that would take substantially more money to do it. So if we're talking about AHIF funds, subsidy, or developers contributing units at 30%, then you're talking about fewer units as opposed to more units at 60%, because it's a matter of what is the delta between that 30% affordability and market rate, right? As opposed to 60% and market rate. So it just takes more money to do units at 30% of affordability. So that's why we try to achieve that. As Commissioner Weir mentioned, we are striving to do that as part of our Barcroft package. And we try to do that on all of our projects, but it does take more money to do that.
So may I ask a follow-up question? Because I think we talked about, was America, which one was the one that came last week? Bingham last month. Feels like last week. Bingham came last month and they did a tremendous job. 2 weeks last morning. They just came. Our last conversation was with Bingham, and they did a good job with at least coming to the table with some on-site affordable housing, which we cannot say for the projects that have come before them, right? And so we applauded their efforts that they brought 5 one-bedroom units and 10 two-bedroom units, right? But they were all at the 60% level. Mm-hmm. And what we learned from our friends at the Community Foundation and other people who are doing a lot of the economic and affordability studies are showing that we actually have a good number, and in fact, maybe even a surplus at 60%. Mm-hmm. And so is there some conversation that's happening, or are we thinking about what we can be doing along this corridor when we're thinking about housing affordability? Maybe that may mean instead of 2, you're getting 1, but it's at a 30% level, and
Right.
we're able to actually meet the needs of
Right.
those who really need to be able to move into this corridor or, in Arlington
Right,
period.
it's a math problem. So you can have more 60% units or you can have fewer at 30%. So it's a choice in each and every case.
Yeah. How do we get, well, maybe that's a different question for when we are at the site-specific planning, I guess.
Right.
But I guess my question was really, how do we start normalizing this more, right? And saying that, because if we have so many at 60% and we are looking at Langston Boulevard now in this broad plan to try to meet some of our affordability goals, I think it's one thing that we say affordability goals, right? But it's another thing to really talk about who are we aiming to help.
Right. Another thing to think about, and I'm not sure how long we're going to be here tonight, but I'll just throw this out. Another way to achieve affordability or ensure affordability is through our housing grant and housing choice voucher. So for those families who cannot afford 60% rent or rent at 60%, then there are other avenues. And so there is, a bit of a discussion or a thought process of, is it better to subsidize units down to 30% or to provide the rent subsidy to the tenants to get them up, So there's 2 ways to do it. I'm not sure which way is better, but there's more than one way to do it.
Thank you so much. And I don't know, Commissioner Berkey, if your question has been answered.
No.
How do we get to the 60?
Well,
Yeah.
mine is just more, it's a staff question about if we could pull up the slide, I think it was the other slide with the table, with the projections of CAFs and marks by 2070. Yep, there we go. Yeah, so I'm just was wondering if you can walk through this again and sort of talk about where these units are really coming from.
Sure. So there's let's say 2 sides to this table, right? One is on the left in the sort of light blue, that's what's existing today. Those are the actual numbers of CAFs at 60%, marks at 60%, and marks at 80% that exist along the corridor in each of the neighborhood areas. And these have been tabulated because we've got housing data on these. On the right side of the table is the potential. And what we're trying to show is what the net change would be in each one of these areas. And obviously the sort of the percentage of distribution. The way we came to the sort of the second half of the table is, as I said a little bit earlier, is for this analysis, and we've done the analysis in a number of different ways over the past 2 years to really try to understand what would be the best way to get this, to meet that goal. And like I said before, when we did the analysis the first time around, we were assuming a 10% all across the board for all new development, which at that time, we didn't have the benefit of understanding what kind of tools we might be using and so forth. So in this go around of the analysis, what we did is we looked specifically at over 30 properties in the core area that we felt pretty comfortable, in assuming that there would be change on those sites, mainly because there's enough density and height already attributed to those properties to incentivize that kind of change. The parcels were large enough, they have been consolidated, or they're under single ownership. And after looking at those sites more closely and applying the sort of the tools that we're proposing that are listed in the plan with those different levels, for the base density and the density above the GLUP, we were able to get a better sense for each of those sites, what would be the changes. And, some sites have existing CAFs, existing marks today at 60% and then 80%. And what we did is we said, okay, with the new tools, these sites, looking at one site in particular, for example, it would generate this many new CAFs. And, the difference is we might lose some marks, but we're going to gain CAFs in return. And so that's why you see a net change. For example, in area 1 and in area 4, in this analysis, we decided we're not going to show any changes or any potential CAFs in those areas because we know that we still need to come back and look at those plans a little bit more closely to see what additional tools are needed to really make that happen. But in the other areas, again, you can see there's a net change, some very little, like for example, area 2 today has very little, a very little share of the affordable units in the core area, only 5%. And the net change really actually brings it down to 4%. So there's just changes
Okay.
based on the individual site
And
analysis.
if I could just add to, I mean, I think a couple important considerations here is that we really have been guided by the Affordable Housing Master Plan that talked about units at 60%. So what this is really displaying is the potential for new CAFs or conversion of marks to CAFs at 60%. There's some potential for some, in this instance, for some marks to remain potentially on sites that may just have infill and existing buildings, do not change. And again, some of the assumptions that went into how we're thinking about our tools and what tools we have at our option to use right now under the Affordable Housing Ordinance. So some of those factors, were really built into what we're seeing here from a CAF reduction perspective in comparison with the earlier models that Natasha explained, where we just took a sort of a broad brush approach with 10% on each site by site, which we know some of the results of that would just not be in keeping with some of our tools and maybe representing a higher yield than maybe what we could expect. And then the other thing too is that those models were a little more conservative in terms of the density increase. And some of the results here are really based on some more specific modeling where we made some assumptions about some different parking assumptions as well. So
Okay. That's incredibly informative. I have a quick follow-up. So with those numbers, so I sort of understand the methodology now, but could you ballpark for me, like, we know that some of our affordable housing developer partners have some sites in the corridor and likely maybe infill or redevelopment. Were those part of this analysis? Like, is some of it affordable housing specific development and like a lot of it like on-site CAFs? Like, what's that? Can you give me a sense of that breakdown?
Sure. So of the 30+ properties that we studied, all of the properties that are today owned by affordable housing providers were included in that analysis. And for those sites, we assumed 100%.
Okay.
Right.
Okay,
And
great.
then where you had marks that were low, we just assumed the increased density.
Okay, great.
So infill and redevelopment were both factored in.
Okay, great. So this is really helpful. I'll give it back to Madam Chair. I guess my comment here is that's really helpful. I think this helps the community understand how we get there. But this is still till 2075 with the existing tools we have. I'll leave it there. Thanks.
So Commissioner Peterson has the more closer question.
Yeah, it was just a question. The staff report mentioned, looking at the next 30 years, but the spaces were blank. So do you have those numbers?
I don't have them in front of me right now. I did a few hours ago when I had it in a different document. But what we do know is it's relatively similar to what we've anticipated in the past, which is most of it is going to happen in the later time frame after the 2040 time frame. And it's simply because most of those sites we know are just going to take longer, either to consolidate, which I think is one of the biggest challenges that we have, or to change ownership to do this sort of change. So like before, the majority of the net new are going to happen in the sort of time frame after the 2040.
Okay, thank you.
Can Commissioner Weir
Can I
and
just
Commissioner Lynn tell me? Oh, I'm
We
sorry.
will have those numbers soon.
We can certainly provide them, yes.
Okay, thank you.
We can provide them.
I apologize, Commissioner Peterson. You saw Commissioner Weir pushing me over here, right?
Sure, it's my fault. I guess maybe I have 2 points, and one might be the first might be mostly for my colleagues, and just to sort of distill a couple of thoughts that I've heard. And I think that which is, I think that what we are sensing is that, and what we've heard a little bit from Mr. Tucker and others, is that there's a very lowercase f formula, right, for how many of what kinds of units are CAFs. And that formula is mostly 60% with some 80%. And I think that the sort of evolving thinking that we're hearing is that maybe the formula is wrong. Not wrong, maybe the formula needs some additional thought, and maybe a better statement of the formula would be still mostly 60% with some 30% and some 80%. And I think that gets to what the chair was saying about rethinking about a new default narrative. Maybe that's sort of the sense of what, maybe that's a useful way of framing how we want to push staff in the future. The second comment, though, and that is, we have just on like page 8 of the PDF, I think it's Roman 4, under increasing housing choice and supply. What there isn't here, what I don't see here, and this isn't a criticism of staff or even the people who participated in the process, but I don't see anything about shared housing or SROs or types of housing supply that are needed to address the supply issue and to increase the varieties of housing that are available to people. And I don't know how we deal with that, but I want to postulate that I want to think out loud that if these are Richmond issues, if we aren't able to encourage people to look at things like mass timber that sort of helps bring the cost of building buildings down, or if we aren't able to encourage developers and applicants to think about SROs and shared housing and other things, if these are Richmond issues, then we need to figure out how to work around Richmond issues for some of our planning goals. And if they are market issues, then we need to figure out how to train applicants and provide technical assistance. And if they're planning issues, then that's a conversation we need to have too. But there are other ways to address this that aren't here. I'm not saying that I think that they need to be added into this document before moving forward, but this isn't the last sector plan we're going to do. So, just a food for thought for the next time around. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lantoni?
First, I want to remind everybody, just my usual announcement, reminder that I'm president of the Langston Boulevard Alliance. I've checked with the county attorney. That's not a conflict for me to be here. However, tonight I'm here as a planning commissioner, so my comments are my comments and are not necessarily those of the Langston Boulevard Alliance. That's it. For affordable housing, when that slide was up here, slide 19, by the way, that I think also shows one thing that we need to do. And I know it's a little bit later, but we were not including Area 1 East Falls Church or Area 4 Cherrydale in the numbers. However, the Affordable Housing Master Plan, which is part of our comprehensive plan, is calling for certain goals for this entire corridor. So we have two major areas within this corridor that are not being counted or not included in the numbers that we're trying to push forward. This again argues for reviewing or revisiting the Cherrydale Revitalization Plan and the East Falls Church Area Plan sooner rather than later, because those are two prime areas that will be necessary in order to meet the goals of the Affordable Housing Master Plan for this entire corridor. And following up on Commissioner Weir, yes, these are all issues that we really do have to be looking at. They're all part of the solution for affordable housing, or the many solutions. But the Affordable Housing Master Plan is probably the vehicle that we would need to look at for that. That, of course, they come up every 5 years. I don't know what the cycle is for that, but it is something that we do need to be revisiting, and this should be part of that conversation in updating that component of the comprehensive plan. Thank you.
Okay, any more comments on housing, supply, affordability? Move on to the next topic. Nope.
I guess I'll
Commissioner
make
Riley?
a quick comment. This is a little bit on the vein of Commissioner Weir pontificating, but I think while we're trying to roll this big rock up the hill, which it is something that we ought to be doing, I think as a way of strategy, and perhaps this goes to Commissioner Lantelmi's comment, we ought to perhaps widen the net a little bit. And one of the things that I brought up at the last meeting was this notion of sheltered bus stops, which would highly encourage or improve, let's say, the use of public transportation, reduce the number of required parking, because every time we house a car, we're not housing someone. So I think, as we think about these sort of big issues, right, which is good, and we got to keep pushing on those. I think there's a lot of things that we can do in the meantime that perhaps could happen in the next, I don't know, year or two, where all the bus stops along Langston Boulevard are sheltered, and it starts to then naturally encourage more people to use public transportation, reduce parking requirements and demand, and slowly move us towards more affordable housing, not so much the cost of the real estate, but the cost of residing, or peripheral costs, or whatever the term would be here. Thanks for letting me pontificate.
Commissioner Stratton.
I got one. So this is unrelated to affordability, but this is related to the sort of by right townhome situation within the Langston Boulevard planning district. I was curious as to why townhouses within that planning district have to go through a site plan and are not by right, as is the case with townhomes within Fort Myer Heights, and other areas around the area. That's in the sample text at the very back of the staff report.
Sure, I'll address that, and Natasha, if you want to add anything. So when we added housing conservation districts to the general land use plan a few years ago, that was with a concern that we were seeing full scale, replacement, removal of multifamily housing with by right townhouses, and the form of that development and how it was really changing the neighborhood, and thinking about the impacts of those form changes, the increase in significant amount of parking, the way that those buildings really presented themselves to the public realm, tree loss, significant grading. There's just a number of really changes to the neighborhood. And really the loss of that level of denser housing were a number of really the factors that went into us calling attention to those on our general land use plan and saying that we're open to the thought of our proposals for townhouse development, but we want the ability to look at what form that takes, and the way to do that would be not through by right development, but site plan development. So as we've gone through this process and we've really investigated much more closely in terms of what the goals are here for Langston Boulevard, there's a lot of similarities about those factors. But we also now are informed by, much more significant details through the community conversation that we're still in the same place where we need to preserve as much land as we can for multifamily housing. And we just don't have the luxury of, continuing to think about that level of lower density in those areas, and some of the impacts to how sites would be designed, with townhouse without further review. So we're continuing to recommend that even though we replace HCD with the proposed plan Langston Boulevard district boundary, that we still think it's appropriate to continue to that site plan would be the mechanism to consider townhouse moving forward.
That makes perfect sense to me. I wanted to tease out whether it was to, encourage more density or less. So I'm glad it's encouraging more. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to density, form, or heights. Density, form, heights. Any takers on this one? Peterson.
Thank you. I had a really quick question that I think you went over in the presentation, but the slide went by quickly. Just going over how are we measuring height? When I was talking to some of our community members in the area, there was confusion there. The Air Force Association building in particular, they were talking about being 4 stories. But if you're looking at it from the back, with the parking and then kind of the rooftop features, it looks like it's almost 6. So then they were saying, if it goes up to 7 or 10, how much taller does it actually get? So if you can just explain to us in the community, how you're measuring building height, we'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure. And I don't know if we'll need the slide, but I can just sort of walk you through that. Normally, site plan or special exception projects, when they come in, the way that the height is measured is, or the vertical distance of the building is based on the average site elevation. And there's a whole way to calculate that. What we were noticing is that in some places along the corridor, depending on the topography, the average site elevation, the actual line or point that described that on the property, meant that in some edges, particularly along low density residential edges, it actually would result in more floors than what the plan itself is showing along those edges. So an example, the Air Force Association site is not one of them. Because in that particular case, and not to get too wonky, the average site elevation would actually be lower. But there are locations where it would be higher. And so if you're immediately abutting a low density, a single family home, or across the street, if the plan says that the maximum is 5 stories, because of the average site elevation, it might actually be 6 or 7, because it starts from that point on. So what we tried to do was to clarify that wherever we've stipulated along, again, sensitive edges and across the street, that whatever the plan says, that the maximum height is taken from the average grade along that common property line. So not the average site elevation, but whatever the grade is at that point. So again, to create more security, more predictability of what's going to be immediately adjacent to them or across the street from them. I hope that.
And that's for all of the areas, or just these ones where the average height actually could result in a higher building?
So that's mainly to address that particular issue where it's a problem for the abutting properties. But even in cases where it would actually be lower, let's say the average site elevation, the max height at that edge is the max height. That's what the plan is trying to.
And it's the sensitive edge, which is abutting the
Yes.
community, the lower density. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Mhm.
Commissioner Steinberger?
Thank you. So Commissioner Peterson asked a question very related to what I was going to get at, and she used the example of the Air Force site. So that's not actually one of those locations that impacted by that change, though? Because I did have the opportunity to tour that site, and I would have thought that it would have been based on what you just described.
So again, it's getting a little technical. It really depends on where that line is, or is determined to be, and that is determined at site plan. The applicant comes in and does a calculation that shows what the average site elevation is, and then they'll look at each one of these edges and determine where that line is. All we're doing is clarifying that no matter where that line is, whether it's higher or lower, the edge along that area has to be up to a maximum height of whatever the plan specifies. That's all we're really trying to do. So for the Air Force Association site, that's a very specific site. It's one of the very few sites along the corridor where the single family housing is actually higher than the Air Force Association site. It slopes dramatically down anywhere between 30 to 40 feet, depending on where you are.
Yeah.
And so for that one site, we wanted to be clear that, we wouldn't want any development to be higher than what we're showing on the plan. But we're, in situations like that where the property slopes downward, there may be opportunities away from the single family edges, like along Langston, where you could attain additional floors as long as the building overall, maintains the required step backs that are there. And they're pretty generous step backs. So even if there's topography to accommodate more floors, if there's not enough depth to accommodate the minimum step backs for like a 7-story, which is 90 feet, and a 10-story is, I don't know the math now, but it's way more than that, then they just wouldn't be able to build
Wouldn't
it.
be able to go higher. So at
They
that
wouldn't.
particular site, because that's something the community, I think, was focused on, is that the setbacks that are described for that site would keep the overall height of a possible new building there to 7 stories. Is that
From
correct?
5 to
Or
7,
From 5
yeah.
to 7, in order to preserve that setbacks, because that's still the requirement. Okay.
Right,
So I think that's a helpful clarification, because
sure.
that was what the community seemed to understand, but was looking for
Right, and
clarification. So if they're listening.
I think, no, I think they understand that.
Okay.
And as Jolie said and others, we were there to look at the site. And so that's why we came back and clarified those things in the policies and how we measure height.
Yeah.
Or in the design guidelines. But again, and they recognize too that the building is not going to be higher than the 7 from what they can see in the back, right?
Right.
But there may be opportunities along the Langston Boulevard side where the topography could absorb a little bit more height and it won't impact them.
Yeah.
Because they won't see it.
Okay. No, understood.
It's buried on the side that they can't see.
Yeah. And it is a very steep slope. I mean, I
Yeah.
can appreciate that, having visited it. Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Commissioner Sarli, then Commissioner Lantami.
So I'm just want to make sure I understand this. So we're pretty much getting rid of average site grade.
No, only along those
Okay, right.
sensitive edges.
So what are sensitive edges? Do we have those defined?
Yeah,
in the
we've,
map?
sure, on the map, we specifically say along edges that abut existing low-density residential areas. We specifically show a transition that I think starts at 4 all the way up to whatever the max height is for that site. If it's across the street, they start at 5. The cross sections that we've included in the design guidelines specifically talk about for abutting properties, like this is and it shows examples, whether the site elevation is higher or lower, the line. It shows 3 different examples of those conditions. But basically, the way we clarify it is by saying if you're abutting or if you're across the street from a low density residential edge, this is where the vertical distance is measured from, versus any other part of your property, it's based on the average site elevation.
So that last part confused me a little bit. So
Sure.
what I'm hearing is the sort of commanding edge becomes the driving height measurer, right? So that becomes whether it's an advantage or a disadvantage compared to the average grade site, right? That becomes the new building height determinant, right? And everything else then trickles up or down from
Yeah,
there.
that's a good way to put it. Yes.
Okay.
Whether it's an advantage or a disadvantage, it doesn't matter.
So let's say I have a 4-story on my site. My grade average says I have 3.5. Doesn't matter. I'm now at 4 stories.
Right. If you're along that edge
Sensitive edge.
and you can build up to 4, if your average site elevation says you can only do 2, you can do 4. So in that case, it's an advantage, but it's still not an impact because we've determined that 4 is appropriate.
Right, but I think, sorry, last time I'm going to repeat this. That then becomes the grade point from which you calculate building height,
Yes.
end of story.
Yes.
All right, thanks so much.
Commissioner Lantami.
Yeah, thank you. I've been trying to look for, and first I ask the indulgence of the chair, if this isn't part of what the discussion is now, but I do have a question about retail in the buildings in the mixed use areas and the ground floor. We have in here indications of various nodes, what types of retail will be required at those particular nodes, either blue or gold. And I have some concerns about a couple of those. Most of them are fine, something I completely agree with. But 2 areas in particular, actually 1 area in particular I'm concerned about is mainly by the Lee Heights. We have that as blue rather than gold. And I'm a bit surprised by that because I would think that that is one of our key retail nodes, one of the most robust ones right now that we're looking to encourage to remain. Why wouldn't that be gold, that particular area? I would think that that's where we really want to have that type of retail classification. Because we're doing that at the corner of Glebe and Langston. And I actually wonder about why it's gold on the north side of Glebe on the north part of, on Glebe north of Langston, that seems a little bit, I'm not sure. That maybe should be blue instead of gold. And it should be gold rather than blue by Lee Heights. So anyway, that's my question.
No, thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner. I know we've talked about this before a number of times.
Any number of times.
And some things don't necessarily, in our minds, let's say, always make sense when we see it on a color on a map and in a location, and why not in another place where we know for sure we want to create that sort of pedestrian vibe. So I think one thing I'll say, and I don't know if Mark is on the line, that where he could maybe speak to the bigger, let's say, concept in terms of retail and all of that. But generally speaking, the plan doesn't discourage the gold. Just because it says blue doesn't mean that you couldn't do gold. And
No, I get that.
right. Okay. So I just wanted to make sure that we're not saying you can't do it.
Right.
It is absolutely possible. I think what you see consistently is that the gold is designated in areas that are major arterials, where we know those types of uses that require the sort of extra costs, like for retrofitting, for restaurants, and which we know includes a lot of additional costs, right, for ventilation and all of that, grease traps, all of that, are usually in places that are going to attract the most number of cars and volume of cars. And that's why they've been shown on along the whole entire corridor at those key intersections, with arterials, between arterials. The Lee Heights shop. So again, this is where I need Mark to maybe give you a little bit more in terms of why it didn't expand all the way. There's certainly, we have talked about it and we've thought about it, expanding the gold all the way to what I believe is Woodstock, which would be the end of the Lee Heights shops. So Mark is on the call. Let's see. Oh, there you are. Thank you.
I'm here. Good evening, everyone. Mark McCauley from Arlington Economic Development. I think the purpose of this policy, and again, it is a policy, is to really focus the clustering around the major intersections that have the most likelihood of success in terms of attracting customers. As Natasha said, it doesn't preclude other locations from coming up with different other ideas. Lee Heights is a perfect example of where very, very, very beloved retailers have created a destination there, but it's still a bit of an awkward retail location. And so if something else came up in the future, I think we'd certainly encourage obviously an active ground floor space as is shown in the plan. But more flexibility allows the developer to come in with something that makes that work. And I think in 2015, when we passed the retail plan, we realized that the overprescribing of ground floor requirements actually led to more detrimental outcomes in terms of vacant spaces or ground floor spaces that met the requirements but weren't as attractive from a vibrancy standpoint. And so I think what we're really trying to do here is, as Natasha said, sort of create the flexibility. It does not preclude anything from happening there if that project can sustain that, an enhanced ground level experience. So that's kind of what the goal that we're trying to marry.
Okay, I'm not sure I'm fully convinced. It's something I think we'd like to discuss a bit further, but not tonight, of course. Because after all, Cherry Hill Road is one of those, it is an odd road, but that's where the bus goes rather than, cars go there, but it's also the bus line. So it does really pull in a lot. And in the future, it should pull in even more people going by and seeing it. So I would like us to discuss that further. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, moving on to East Falls Church and Cherrydale Revitalization Districts, GLUP, and existing land use plans. Any comments on this topic? Okay. Oh, okay.
I think that there might be a motion to this effect, either from me or one of my colleagues, but I really hope that we can encourage we can do what we can to encourage the board to prioritize revisiting East Falls Church in Cherrydale as soon as possible.
Thank you. Commissioner Steinberger?
I didn't have anything
You have
else.
your light on?
Okay.
Okay, great. All right, moving on to transportation. This includes transit, facilities, infrastructure, parking, and roads. Commissioner Lantelmi, then Commissioner.
Yeah, I
Kreidler.
just want to give the neighborhoods a little bit of comfort here because I know that, for example, in North Highlands, there's been a lot of concern about the proposed east-west roads through there. The way it works for the MTP is that we do not prescribe a specific route in the areas where new roads are being considered. That ends up as part of the site plan process. There's a great deal of flexibility in how those roads are routed, what they would look like, how they can be designed, so that it is not over by what you see on the map there doesn't necessarily mean that's what will happen. So just keep that in mind about that's how our MTP works for new streets.
Thank you. Commissioner Streiner, then Commissioner Peterson.
Yeah, so I work in transportation, so this is right up my alley. I'm curious what the sequence is with the sort of, we have the 5 different zones. Like, does the county have a plan at this stage of like which one's going to come first? Are they going to prioritize, closer to Roslyn, closer to East Falls Church? What's the kind of sequence there?
Kristen Calkins, DS Transportation Planning. We don't have a sequence right now. So the plan that is articulated really identifies that a lot of this is going to be kind of a partnership with developments that are coming in through the process. We're really hoping to target those intersections that need county investment that won't have that private investment coming to them. We have an opportunity in the upcoming CIP with the adoption of Langston Boulevard, if it happens, to really think about what we want to prioritize through this planning process and continuing it. But right now, the plan does not articulate a this is the first intersection or this is the first segment that we want to address. We acknowledge the fact that there's an important component of this that is the development itself happening. That is part of our opportunity to create that impetus to improve specific locations.
Okay, and as a follow-up on that, do any of these line up with sort of Vision Zero priorities, high injury intersections, roadways, things of that nature?
That the Vision Zero program is happening, in and of its own program. I do not know specifically off the top of my head which parts of the corridor may or may not be targeted through the Vision Zero process, but the website articulates that what's up and coming as far as the Vision Zero program goes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. The first was just if you can speak to some of the concerns that we've heard about the evacuation routes and how we're going to continue to maintain safety while doing this plan. And then my second kind of line of questioning is about the parking nodes, which I think are really creative ways of handling community concerns about losing street parking. And I'm interested to know, how negotiations are going to happen if one area that would be theoretically sharing a parking node is getting redeveloped, much earlier than another one. Does the community kind of help out with some of the redevelopment costs in lieu of that other partner being present to help with the parking node? And then also, since we would have these parking nodes, does that relieve the applicants or developers from needing to have on-site parking? And if so, are we able to leverage some of those increased costs to get more on-site affordable housing or other community benefits?
So I might need you to repeat these, but I'm going to tackle them at least in the way I heard them. So the first idea about these parking nodes are in private developments. They are part of it's the required parking as part of these private developments. But our intention is that through site plan applications that we're creating shared access agreements, basically saying that, yes, this is parking that serves my retail, but it can serve the retail that comes in around. And as those site plans come in, that's something that staff works with. And if I need Jen to, I'm going to have her chime in and tell me if I'm saying anything incorrectly, that as site plans come in, this is part of our negotiation with applicants, is that we're making sure that these parking spaces that are created are shared, so that it's not if you park at this building, you can only access the retail that is served by this building. That's the idea of these parking nodes, and really reflecting on some of those larger parcels' ability to accommodate parking for the smaller adjacent parcels. Those are going to be where we expect these nodes to be, is those bigger draws. Because of that, it's not really we will be not providing parking in other locations. It's that we want to make sure that parking that is provided is accessible, so we don't overpark along the corridor, or that we don't create issues where people park in one building, feel like they have to move their car again so that they can go like 2 blocks down and park again, which is exactly what people do in the corridor today. It's much more about creating a one-stop opportunity, so that if you park in a building, you can walk along the corridor and go wherever you want to go, cross the street, do a couple of different things, return to your car that was parked in a different building. So that's really the vision behind the shared parking, the parking nodes, is that they're accessible to many people going to different places along the corridor. It also isn't replacing on-street parking. There's not really a lot of on-street parking on Langston Boulevard right now. We recognize that that's not really part of the cross sections. There's maybe opportunities to create it on some of the new streets, but the shared parking is really making sure that in these nodes that we don't create in garages or in structured parking what exists today, which is if you park for one business, you're really only able to park for that business.
First question.
Yeah.
Repeat your first question. Did she
And-
answer your first question?
Your first question was evacuation routes. So Langston Boulevard, it is a VDOT facility. Any changes to its configuration, specifically in the cross section that people will refer to, where we're going from 6 to 4 lanes, which is from Beach to Spout Run or Kirkwood, if you want to choose a specific road, we'll have to go under a coordinated review with VDOT. VDOT has been a part of our process thus far. They have read and seen our transportation analysis. We've answered questions. For the time and place that we're in at a high level planning study, the work that we've done says this is something that can be achieved in the future. If we go and do a detailed corridor analysis, VDOT will be part of that process. The travel time considerations will be part of it. I think we also need to remember that safety is just not a singular incident in time, but it's also a daily experience in everybody's lives. People travel along Langston Boulevard every single day, and we want to make sure that they're safe while they're doing it. So it's not just in this one specific time and place where we may need to have some sort of coordinated evacuation, but on a day-to-day basis, who's using Langston Boulevard? Are we accommodating them, and are we doing so safely?
Oh, Commissioner Lentoni.
Yeah, I just want to weigh in on the evacuation thing. It's a red herring argument. I was here for 9/11 and I saw what the traffic was like trying to get out of DC and out of Arlington. You cannot have enough asphalt to evacuate in any reasonable time frame DC, Arlington, and Alexandria. It simply cannot be done. It is impossible. So it is a total red herring argument. That's just my weighing in on that.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'd like to align myself with Commissioner Lentelmi's comments on that.
Okay, thanks. All right, moving on to historical, cultural resources. Did you have something for transportation?
No, for
wonderful.
resources, but I
Here
know
we
you
go.
like to keep things.
I
moving.
do, so I'm glad you raised your hand quickly. Historical, cultural resources and preservation, Commissioner Guerin, please,
Yeah,
then Commissioner Steinberger.
Thank you. So I'm really grateful for the plan and its focus on the broad needs for the community. The housing, yes, but also the transportation updates that are needed, the public space needs for the growing population, and the opportunities to support the county's sustainability and resilience goals. And I feel like including this focus on the historical, cultural resources and preservation gives us an opportunity for placemaking that could otherwise be missing, and adding some historical references, even as we're talking about large scale changes that are coming. I'm especially interested in efforts to support some of the local small businesses and to recognize that each community has its own history and vision. So there's not one monolithic community. I'm really gratified to hear how the staff worked with the folks around the Air Force Association building, and then to hear Wilma talk about Area 5 and how that's unique on its own. So so far, I feel like this has been really great and responsive. So those are my general comments on that. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would like to align myself with Commissioner Guerin's comments as well as make a separate comment. We did hear from the JML Civic Association this evening with regards to the historic preservation district designation and the money that they've just received for a grant to do some preservation work. And I understand that the Langston Boulevard Alliance is also supportive of looking at a lower density for the block that they referenced. I just want to clarify for the purpose of the RTA, if we advertise the higher density, we could go down from there?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can always go down.
Okay, so that's fine. So for the purposes of advertising, I think the plan as done is fine on that point, but I do think that's something that should bears further consideration, at next month or whenever the plan comes back to the commission.
I'm going to align myself with Commissioner Steinberger's comments. Any other comments?
As do I.
As does Commissioner Tenley. I mean, well, Tenley. And Commissioner Sarli. Any other thoughts on historical cultural resources and preservation? Public spaces? Oh, go ahead.
So we received many comments from parents and folks associated with the Rivendell School with regards to the open space at the Lee, I think, Lee Center. So can we pull up a map or something that shows that? Thank you. Oh, no, they're showing the map.
Just give us a second. I gotta pull the map.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
All right, so we're pulling that up.
So, okay, so there a pointer situation?
I could point at it.
Thank
It's
you.
right here.
The bottom left corner.
Yes, it's the very bottom left. You
Okay,
can see
okay,
it.
I can see
Very
it. Okay.
small.
So
Lee Community Center.
my question with regards to this is that with the open space, the public spaces, open spaces that are kind of potential to be redeveloped and what might be coming with the Langston Boulevard plans, what is the plan for potentially that green space as it exists now, and what would be the closest nexus to other green space that might be available for the school, the community in general there, just to better understand?
All right, so first I'll clarify that this process or this study isn't looking at any one of those public sites or facility sites with any level of detail. For example, in the same way that we looked at all the other parcels and lots, for consolidation and all of that. We didn't do a deep dive to see what would fit on the property. In fact, we were just looking at if you look at the scenarios that we present in the plan under public facilities, it shows that we were just looking at a very high level what the potential combination of uses could be. But in no way did we actually study how much of, let's say, if it's a community center, how big it would be. If it's a mixed use project that incorporated affordable housing and community uses, like how big that would be. We weren't programming any one of those sites. Again, just looking at a very high level, what potential combination of uses could be considered, because we're trying to accomplish many different goals, and public sites, I think, as others have said, should stay public, and I think we're all supportive of that. But if there's opportunities for those public sites to do multiple things, including provide affordable housing, which we know it's a need, maintain public spaces like they have now, perhaps with different types of uses. We don't know what the need will be for public spaces, what types of uses those public spaces can have, or activities, or what kind of recreation or amenities they should support, because we don't know yet. We're not at that point in time where we could determine what are the actual needs for the community. But we're definitely recognizing that we want to maintain the green spaces in those public sites. We want to maintain those public sites as public. We just want to recognize that there are very few places where the county can allocate AHIP funds. And we've already talked about this quarter being a priority for allocating AHIP funds for CAFs. And so the best place to start is on public land that we already own. So that's, now your other part of the question about what other areas could support, let's say the Rivendell School, we wouldn't be able to know that again at this point in time. Yeah.
I think, okay, go ahead, Commissioner, tell me.
Yeah, following up on that, one thing I do disagree with the existing plan, with the proposed plan right now, is where it says that it looks to consolidate community facilities up and down the corridor. And I know that that is really part of the POPs, the other plan. That probably should be revisited too, because if we're going to move forward with the additional people that this corridor is planned to have, which I fully support, we're going to be needing more community facilities. And this is a really long corridor. Consolidating them doesn't make any sense. It just encourages more driving. We need more of them that are spread out rather than consolidating. I understand the desire for having other uses on the public land. I'm sympathetic with that, but I think that if we look and walk up and down the corridor, there are spots where the county could end up potentially using AHIP funds to purchase some properties that could be used for 100% affordable housing. And I think I'm happy that the plan now recognizes that. So that's a real win. But I think that those would be the sites that would be the most easily done, rather than using the very few publicly owned properties that we have, because there's a huge demand for public facilities. So thank you.
I want to align myself with Commissioner Lantelmi's comments. I mean, I think that we are suffering with a need for public spaces right now along the corridor. And so I would agree that we need to look at options other than consolidating. And of course, I mean, we have competing interests all over the place, but what Commissioner Lantelmi has very succinctly laid out, I want to make sure that I go on record as aligning with that. Commissioner Streiner.
Yeah, I'd also like to align myself with Commissioner Lantelmi and Patel. I wanted to ask regarding the sort of, I know there's a big emphasis on privately owned public spaces, and I know we just voted on an amendment to the zoning code that allowed more of those. Is there an effort to encourage the use of public parks, not just privately owned parks? We have a lot of privately owned parks down in Crystal City where I live, and I think there's something that's lost there when you don't have the public spaces that are preserved. And I was wondering if there is a way to kind of counterbalance some of that, or if there's any plan to utilize public parks more so than's already in the plan right now.
Well, the plan recognizes that there will be other processes in the future that will look at those parks just through the regular public space planning process. So this plan didn't want to get into the specific details, because that again would have to undergo another whole community input process to determine what the future use or redesign of any one of those spaces.
Right.
And we were really focused on attaining new ones, expanding the number of public spaces, not necessarily just looking at but there are the plan does recognize that there's always room for improvement, let's just say, for the existing ones.
Absolutely. All right, thank you.
I will also align myself with Commissioner Lantelmi's sentiment, and I was going to add, just from a design principles, this is like our biophilic design principles. There's these nodes of density and height, and then there's these respites, right, in between these nodes as you're traveling along a road or as you're commuting on your day-to-day, and those parks, right, that happen on the side of the road, whether you're on a car, whether you're on a bicycle, they become these sort of visual respites that have a real benefit to the urban fabric. So I think something like the Lee Center, is really a critical jewel piece to remain at that sort of level of density and that sort of open space because of that, right? We're going to have the Harrison Center, we have the East Falls Church Center. Those hopefully at some day will become very dense and very like focal nodes, and then this will be the respite as you're traveling from one to the other. And I think that's really critical and important and successful, or contributes to the success of the plan. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we have our final topic now of the evening, sustainability and resilience. This is what we're talking about with other infrastructure, stormwater, and tree canopy. Any comments here? Any thoughts?
I do.
Commissioner Guerin.
And I also had a comment on the last point. I align myself also with Commissioner Lantelmi's comments and the idea of the nodes that Commissioner Sarli raised. That space that's behind the Lee Center not only has that play field on it, but it has a privately maintained native plant garden that I think offers a lot of respite to folks in the community. Commissioner Streiner, just to your other point, a lot of those parks that are along Lee Highway, for example, Tuckahoe Park is widely used by Tuckahoe School. So these parks do get used around the clock. The school grounds tend to be limited to the students during the school day, but on the weekends they're widely used. So a lot of them are de facto community parks in the off hours. On this issue of resilience and sustainability, I just want to reiterate Commissioner McIntyre's points about renovating and converting uses as much as possible. I know I'm really sounding like Commissioner Sarli here, but I think he raises really good points. We're a little behind the curve in terms of how much we support those uses and the embedded carbon in an existing building and the disruption to an area when we completely raise the building and rebuild. That seems to be our practice in Arlington, but I don't think it needs to be. I think we could ask our developers to explore more renovation and conversion. Thanks.
Any other comments on resilience?
I'll just align myself with Commissioner Guerin's comments. I think that it may require us to ask our developers to occasionally be more creative than what we're seeing, but I think that's something we can incentivize to.
Commissioner Lantelmi?
Yeah, this is on resilience, right? So we can raise stormwater now?
Yes.
Okay. I want to make sure that we are also talking with and working with that community effort on stormwater. As you know, there's been quite a number of community meetings dealing with that. Jackie Stelling's been heading that up. I will assume that you're in discussions with her and with that effort to make sure their concerns are addressed in this plan, because stormwater really continues to be an issue for a number of the nodes up and down the Langston Boulevard. And I definitely see a lot of progress from the last draft to this one on stormwater, so I'm really happy to see that. I just want to make sure that we're doing everything that we need to do to make sure that it is addressed, and addressed in a way that we'll work with DES, because I know they have a lot that they're working on, and they might have some new things that are going to be released probably within the next couple months, and that we're able to make sure that what they're doing will be reflected in here, so that we're not end up working across purposes or not complementing each other.
Understood. And I know that our DES staff keeps close relationship and discussions on those topics with those subgroups. Yeah.
Any other thoughts on this point? Okay, we're ready to go to a motion. Commissioner Weir.
All right, so I'm going to begin with the staff recommended motion. If I can find it. Is that that's indeed it is. Okay, thank you. So I move that the planning commission recommend that the county board adopt the resolution at attachment 1 to the staff report, authorizing advertisement of public hearings by the planning commission on October 30, 2023, and the county board on November 11, 2023, to consider adoption of the following elements associated with the Langston Boulevard planning study. A, the Langston Boulevard area plan at attachment 2 to the staff report. B, the general land use plan map and booklet amendments at attachment 3 to the staff report. C, the master transportation plan map amendments at attachment 4 to the staff report. And D, Arlington County zoning ordinance amendments to sections 6.1, 7.12, and 12.3 at attachment 5 to the staff report.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Lantelmi? Okay, any discussion?
Process question. So if one were to want to adjust the timing or propose a motion to push back the request to advertise by 1 month, would that happen now?
This would be the most of the time when we do something, it could either take the form of a standalone motion or an amendment to the main motion.
Yeah.
In this case, it would be critical that it be an amendment to the main motion because that date is part of the main motion itself.
So this would be an amendment. So I would be amending your motion.
Yes.
So, okay.
So would it be she would be amending it to request to advertise the public hearing by the planning commission and county board no earlier than.
The motion would be to change the dates to the
The
subsequent
corresponding
dates.
Okay. So I need to look up what those dates are. Unless, clerk, are you able to tell me offhand what the dates for the November planning commission, the December planning commission meeting and county board meetings are?
Yes, I can.
Oh, thank you.
December.
It would be the December 16 county board meeting.
4 and 6, and then
16th.
and then the 16th of the board meeting. Okay, so I'm moving to amend the motion before us to reflect the December 6th planning commission meeting and the December 16th county board meeting.
Hold on one second.
PC is December 4th.
Okay, is there a second on Commissioner Steinberg's motion?
Hold on. I think that the clerk's point is that we're conflating the RTA and the action. And so I gave you I think that the amendment before there's a second, the amendment that you want to make would be the November planning commission and board meetings for the hold on. I take back what I said. I take back what I said. I take back what I said. Yeah. Yep, my apologies.
Okay, is there a second on that motion?
I'll second.
Commissioner Sarli is seconding. All right. I don't think.
I'm
we
sorry,
need-
excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
Commissioner Steinberger said December the 6th.
I said December, I may have said it, but I meant the 4th.
You meant the 4th. Okay. I just want to be clear.
Yeah, I apologize.
For the
I said
record.
6th, I said 4th.
Okay.
Apologies.
Okay, so
4th and the 16th.
The 4th and the 16th.
You might have heard 16th to the board.
Mhm.
Right, and then the 16th, and yeah, okay.
okay, the motion has been made by Commissioner Steinberger and it's been seconded by Commissioner Sarli. Now we will go to a vote. Commissioner Bagley,
Aye.
Commissioner Guerin,
Nay.
Commissioner Steinberger,
Aye.
Commissioner Weir,
Nay.
and then tell me,
Nay.
Peterson,
Nay.
Sarli,
Aye.
Berkey,
Nay.
Shriner,
Nay.
Robertson,
Aye.
Patel, nay. The motion fails. The vote is 7-4. 7-4. There's 11 of us here today. Yes, sir.
Just when I can make an motion or motion to amend
Sure.
original motion?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and read the proposed motion that I sent to the chair this afternoon. I recommend that the county, so my amendment, I'm going to explain it. I'll read it and then I guess I can explain it after I get a second. I recommend that the county board amend the Langston Boulevard area plan to include the following strategy action for county staff within this section labeled comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance amendments, which starts on page 172. And I'll go ahead and read this. Complete a comprehensive review of the Langston Boulevard planning area and propose actions and strategies for preserving and supporting construction of affordable housing within the corridor that are not provided for within the Langston Boulevard area plan and or the county's affordable housing master plan. Such actions and strategies should include an evaluation of whether existing required contributions adequately mitigate the loss of market rate affordable housing resulting from excess density. Examples of such actions and strategies could include, but are not limited to, seeking increases in required contributions by applicant developers to the affordable housing program, modifying and or waiving of certain development and or construction fees for affordable housing development within the Langston Boulevard planning area, providing greater incentives for building affordable units within the Langston Boulevard planning area, within the county's notice of funding availability process for affordable housing investment fund applications, and considering strategies to facilitate the co-location of affordable housing within private and public lands within the Langston Boulevard planning area.
Is there a second to this motion?
Before we do that, could I ask him to make one word change?
Sure.
Could you remove the word excess and use the word additional? Excess sounds like you're making a judgment.
I will accept that friendly amendment.
Okay. Did you second it as well, Jim?
I seconded it,
Oh, thank you. Okay.
and I still second
wait.
it, even with the one word change.
Even with the word change. Wonderful. Okay. Commissioner
Sure,
Wilkie.
I'll briefly speak to this motion. You know, a lot of folks tonight, a lot of folks within our community over the last couple months, if not years, have expressed, you know, concerns about affordable housing along Langston Boulevard. It's been a topic of great conversation in our subcommittee meetings and even tonight. And I do want to just go out of my way to applaud our planning staff, our housing staff for all the efforts they've made here. You've been incredibly responsive and nimble. Chasing affordable housing requires balancing competing priorities. It costs a lot of money. There's land considerations. So I want to preface this, what I'm proposing to say, I think this plan, it gets us there, but it gets us there way, way too late. It's not as aggressive as it needs to be, and that is not in any way responsibility of staff. I think staff has, what they've proposed here really is as far probably as we can go with the current tools at our disposal. What we require now is our county board to be more aggressive and to give our staff more tools in order to support our affordable housing developer partners, to chase after land acquisition opportunities, to sort of do everything that we sort of can and not just sit back and wait for this to happen. So my proposal here is to really to put it in the document to say, we really want to be aggressive in looking at this now. What can we do in Langston Boulevard that we're not even necessarily doing in other parts of the county to support affordable housing construction? I think staff has made several suggestions about AHIF and TDRs and other policies, but it seems to me we need to be much more aggressive. And so this at least gives us an imprimatur to ask for further review and consideration.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any additional comment or Commissioner Sarli?
I will be abstaining from this vote, take a page out of Commissioner Hughes' vote, not because I disagree with it in concept or in principle, but I think I would like to see, before we get to sort of more aggressively pursuing housing, this goes back to my comment that I made earlier on, I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that we can do that would positively impact the cost associated with living in Arlington, that, you know, goes to walkability, to public transportation, to, grocery stores and all this other stuff. So I think, if anything, I would encourage staff to look at that area before I would sort of double down on this heavy rock that we keep pushing uphill. Thank you.
Commissioner Streiner?
I was going to say that this seems like a very low risk sort of way of determining what we can do. It's a study, we're not pushing, we're not, we're not putting any regulations on developers. This is just a quick glance around and see what's here, what else we can shake loose in terms of, affordable housing here in this corridor. We're not binding commitments to this. This is just exploring.
Commissioner Peterson?
Yeah, so I was just wondering, are we saying that they should complete the comprehensive review before we approve the plan, or this would be something to do in the future?
No, I mean, this really, I think, goes along in the spirit of a lot of what staff has done to be responsive to a lot of the community concerns. There are quite a few commitments to study other areas, right? And I think this would be an additional one. And if there are other studies of affordable housing that may or may not occur within the next few years, maybe this could be, folded within them or consolidated.
Okay, are we ready do you have comments?
Yeah, I align myself with Commissioner Sarli's comments. I also will not be supporting this.
Okay, and Commissioner Lantami?
Yeah, I like the idea of what he's saying, but I'm not going to support it only because I think this is something that should be part of the review of the affordable housing master plan component of the comprehensive plan. So I think that's where all this really should take place. It really doesn't fit within this particular plan. It's a county-wide initiative, which is definitely worth doing, but it belongs in the affordable housing master plan.
Okay, Commissioner Steinberger?
I'm going to align myself with Commissioner Lantomi's comments. I think I'm hesitating here because I guess I'm confused if this is the right vehicle to make this motion and to take this action. I support the ambitions of the amendment. I'm just not sure if this is the vehicle by which to do this.
Commissioner Weir?
I'm going to support the proposed amendment, and we are ultimately the keepers of the comprehensive plan, an element of which is the housing plan. It is always appropriate for us to weigh in on the where anything touches or hits the comprehensive plan. And I think more, normally I think I would align myself with Commissioner Latelmi on this one. This might be one of our biggest substantive breaks in 7 years. But we have heard so much specific concern about where we are on our affordable housing goals with respect to this plan. And I think that specific concern at least that it warrants a recommendation like this to the county board. This is the kind of recommendation that the county board is looking for us. It's not binding, right? We are signaling to the county board where we think there are areas of concern as to our ability to hit the comp plan. So another way of saying it is I agree with everything that Commissioner Berkey has said and plan to support it.
Okay, I was just waiting for somebody to say that we're the keeper of the plan, so I align myself with Commissioner Weir, and I think we've almost all spoken on it now, so maybe we can take a vote? Yes? Okay, great. Commissioner Bagley?
Aye.
Gearan?
No.
Steinberger?
Aye.
Weir?
Aye.
Lantami?
Nay.
Peterson?
Aye.
Sarli?
Abstain.
Berkey?
Aye.
Shriner?
Aye.
Aye.
Patel? Aye. So the motion to amend carries 8-2 with 1 abstention. Okay, so now we have the motion as amended. Are there any other motions to amend tonight? Great.
I'm going to have, I'm going to introduce it as a secondary motion.
Perfect. Okay, so now we have the motion as amended. Everyone? Ready? Okay. Commissioner Bagley?
Aye.
Commissioner Gearan?
Aye.
Steinberger?
Aye.
Weir?
Aye.
Lantami?
Aye.
Peterson?
Aye.
Sarli?
Aye.
Berkey?
Aye.
Shriner?
Aye.
Robertson?
Aye.
Patel? Aye. That motion carries 11-0. Here, all you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the Planning Commission endorse the recommendation of the Housing Commission, urging the county board to revisit the East Falls Church and Cherrydale plans to take a holistic and comprehensive look at all of the Langston Boulevard corridor and its housing needs and opportunities.
I'll second.
Okay, so the motion by Commissioner Weir as seconded by Commissioner Lantelmi. Is it self-explanatory?
The only thing that isn't in writing is that that the planning commission endorses the housing commission recommendation urging the county board. Everything else is word for word from the letter from the housing commission.
Okay. Commissioner Sarli?
I would just strongly align myself with the notion of holistic planning instead of doing these plans with missing teeth that always absolutely frustrate me.
Okay. So that's an alignment with the Housing Commission.
Sorry for the misunderstanding. Yes, I super support this.
Okay, thank you. All right, are we ready for a vote? Commissioner Bagley?
Aye.
Kieran?
Aye.
Steinberger?
Aye.
Lear?
Aye.
Lantelmi?
Aye.
Peterson?
Aye.
Sarli?
Aye.
Berkey?
Aye.
Shriner?
Aye.
Robertson?
Aye.
And Patel, aye. That motion carries 11-0. Is there anything else? Any other business of PC tonight? Wonderful. Listen, we make these things look easy only because of staff. And so thank you once again to all of you who make these meetings possible for us to attend in person and virtually. And I know that there was a lot of conversation about process with regard to how we got this most recent iteration and version of the Plan Langston Boulevard, the plan. I want to say again, I think that it's not lost on any of us that we would love to be able to have more time to review these plans in advance of our meetings. Of course, we understand that these are balancing acts. And so we could have come here tonight with maybe a less detailed plan if we were to get it in a week in advance. And then alternatively, we had more detail, but maybe less time to review it. We understand that it's a balancing act. I think that everyone here raises really good points. I think that we just can probably do a little bit better in getting these plans to the community as quickly and as early as possible. We have more work to do on Wednesday. So thank you all. Thank you to my fellow commissioners. We will see everybody on Wednesday, October 4th. Thank you. We are in recess.
Thank you.